I had no idea that giving my baby to the wrong person would change my life forever. Less than 48 hours. But here I am. 1 week postpartum. Sitting alone in our apartment with a newborn while my husband's belongings are gone and divorce looms over me. I'm Brianna, 29, and I'd want to tell you how I managed to wreck my marriage faster than my episiotomy stitches could heal. Carter and I got married after 2 years of dating. It was a whirlwind. Both of us were moving up in our careers. We had this gorgeous little flat in the city and were always on the same page about everything. Or so I thought. My friendship with Liam was always a source of irritation for him. My ex from college. Liam and I dated for 3 years before deciding we were better as friends. We ended our relationship 5 years ago. Yet we never really stopped being in each other's lives. When Carter and I initially started dating, he appeared fine with Liam being around. But once we got engaged, he began making these small comments. Like when Liam texted me late at night and I laughed at something he said. Carter would wonder, what's so amusing that he needs to tell you at midnight? I'd roll my eyes and tell him he was acting ridiculously. Liam and I were just friends, and Carter needed to work through his jealousy issues. I discovered I was pregnant just 9 months after the wedding. It was a total accident. I forgot 2 medicines over our friend's destination weekend. I was stressing out because we had a 5-year plan that did not involve a baby in the first year. But Carter. He was overjoyed and began reading all of these dad books and installing parenting apps before I had even recovered from morning sickness. Liam had gone to Seattle for work around the time Carter and I were married, which made things simpler because he wasn't physically present. But 3 months into my pregnancy, he was sent back to our city. He quickly became my pregnancy buddy, bringing me ginger candies to alleviate nausea and texting me practically every day to see how I was feeling. Carter saw right away, doesn't Liam have his own life to care about? He'd inquire anytime my phone vibrated with a new text message. He's just being supportive, I'd explain, and I don't understand why Carter couldn't simply enjoy having another person looking out for me. As my pregnancy developed, Liam became increasingly involved. He'd arrive with dinner while Carter was working late. He'd offered to drive me to appointments if Carter couldn't make them. He even joined us for a few of the childbirth classes when Carter had to work. Looking back, I can see how Carter's jaw tightened whenever Liam injected himself into another pregnancy milestone. By month 7, Carter had finally set his foot down. We had a big fight, and he told me it wasn't usual for my ex to be so involved with our pregnancy. I told him he was being controlling, and Liam was simply a nice buddy who cared about me. He's more than just a friend, Brianna. He's your ex-boyfriend who is obviously still in love with you. And you're either too blind to notice it, or you enjoy the attention too much to stop it. Carter had stated that I was outraged. I accused him of attempting to isolate me when I needed help the most. 3 weeks before my due date, I began having contractions, while Carter was attending a work conference 2 hours away. When I called, he promptly departed but got stranded in bad traffic. After an hour of timing my contractions, and realizing they were growing closer together, I panicked and immediately contacted Liam. He arrived at our place in 15 minutes and took me to the hospital. My contractions were intense by the time I was checked in and settled into the labor and delivery room. Liam was right there, holding my hand through each contraction, getting the ice chips, and advocating for me with the nurses when I was too in pain to talk. Carter showed up 4 hours later, looking stressed and untidy. The atmosphere in the room altered immediately. Carter gave Liam a frigid nod, and Liam, who had been seated directly next to my bed in what was clearly the partner chair, did not instantly move to give Carter his seat. "How do you feel, babe?" Carter asked, moving to the opposite side of the bed. "I'm hanging in there," I replied, before turning to Liam when another contraction came. "Can you press on my back like the nurse showed you?" I didn't notice how Carter's face sank when Liam jumped up to assist me with the contraction, demonstrating a strategy they must have discussed when Carter was stalled in traffic. The next 18 hours were a jumble of pain, tiredness, with medical personnel entering and exiting. Carter did his best to take on the support role, but it was clear he felt like an alien. Liam didn't pick up on the message to leave, or perhaps he ignored them and stayed throughout the labor. When our daughter finally came at 5:37 a.m., I was absolutely exhausted. The nurse cleaned her up while the doctor dealt with me. Carter was in tears, and Liam, who was standing in the corner of the room, appeared to be sad. "Would you like to hold your daughter?" the nurse asked, approaching the bed with our tiny blanket-wrapped baby. This is the moment when everything was destroyed. I couldn't see it at first, but as I looked up, still stunned from the delivery, I noticed Carter and Liam standing there. Without actually thinking, I indicated to Liam and told him to hold her first. "He's been here since the beginning." The nurse paused, glancing between the men with uncertainty. Carter's face became absolutely white. His mouth opened slightly, as if he wanted to say something but couldn't find the right words. Except for the baby's small noises, the room became completely silent. Are you certain? The nurse inquired, visibly uneasy. Yeah, it's fine, I replied, still not recognizing the bomb I had just dropped. Liam, please meet my daughter. The nurse reluctantly placed my newborn daughter into Liam's arms. He stared down at her in astonishment and whispered, She's perfect. Bree. I smiled tiredly, feeling a strange sense of completeness as he held her. It wasn't until I looked across at Carter that I understood something was very wrong. He had taken a step back against the wall, his face a mask of pain and disbelief. What is wrong? I asked, genuinely perplexed by his reply. What is wrong? Carter repeated with a low, shaky voice. You just gave our kid to your ex-boyfriend, who is now holding her father in front of me. The way he said it had my stomach drop, yet my first reaction was to become defensive. Oh, God, don't make this a huge thing. He arrived first and has been quite helpful throughout. You will get to hold her next. That isn't the point, Brianna. Carter replied, his voice tight with repressed rage. That was meant to be our moment. Mine, yours, and our girls. Not his. Liam shifted awkwardly while holding the baby. Maybe I should give her to you, man, he told Carter, finally appearing to read the room. No. He is overreacting, I replied quickly. I turned to Carter. Why are you attempting to create drama now? I've just given birth. Can you stop making everything about yourself for 5 minutes? Carter's eyes welled up with pain, but before he could react, my phone vibrated with a notification. Liam took a selfie with the baby while we were bickering and emailed it to me. Carter stared as I reflexively checked it. His expression hardened more. Seriously? He mentioned that you are currently checking your phone. It's only a snapshot. I explained, holding up the phone to show him. Look how adorable they are together. Carter looked at the photo and then at me, as if he couldn't believe what was occurring. I'm going to get some air, he murmured, eventually turning toward the door. Carter, do not be silly. I called after him. Come, hold your daughter. He hesitated in the doorway, staring back at the three of us. I'm in the hospital bed. Liam is still cradling our newborn. Is she? He inquired politely, and then walked out. I rolled my eyes at his dramatic departure. He will chill off, I informed Liam and the nurse, who was becoming increasingly uneasy. He's simply weary and emotional. The following day saw a parade of nurses, lactation consultants, and doctor check-ins. Carter remained in the room but was distant, spending the majority of his time either cradling the infant silently or looking at his phone. When Liam contacted to ask if he could visit, I said yes. Carter's entire body tightened up. Carter remarked gently, I thought we'd have some family time today, when Liam arrived with flowers. Yes, we are, I responded. Liam is simply popping by to check on us. Brianna, that is not what family means. However, Liam stayed for several hours when a nurse arrived to check my vitals. She grinned at Liam and asked, Dad, would you like to go skin to skin with the baby while I work with Mom? Before I could correct her, Liam smiled and stated, Oh, I'm not the father, just the best friend. When Carter told the nurse about the mix-up, she seemed bewildered and ashamed. He said nothing. He simply removed the infant from the bassinet and sat on the chair furthest from Liam. Later that evening, after Liam had left, Carter attempted to speak with me. Brianna, we need to talk about some boundaries here. What are the boundaries? I inquired, scrolling through the photos Liam had sent me from the day, some of which I was posting on Facebook with descriptions such as baby's first day with her favorite people. Liam is always here. The nurse believed he was the father. Can't you see how twisted up this is? I glanced up from my phone, agitated. Now I do not. He's being supportive, yet you're strangely jealous. He drove me to the hospital. Carter, it should have been me. Carter spoke, his voice tight. I am her father. I'm her husband. And I feel as if I'm being driven out of my own family before it ever begins. You're being ridiculous, I remarked. Nobody is pushing you out of anything. Your fears are causing you to overreact to nothing. Carter said nothing else that night. The next morning, he was quieter than normal, but he helped me shower and prepare for discharge. We began packing our belongings after the doctor informed us that we may return home about midday. Liam might stop by today. He stated he got some goods for us. I mentioned lightly. Carter ceased folding. Brianna, I do not want him in our apartment today. Why not? He's just dropped off groceries. Because I would like to do it one day. Only one day with you and our daughter. Without your ex-boyfriend becoming involved. I sighed heavily. Are you still on this? I assumed you'd be over it by now. What exactly have they gotten over? The fact that you continue to disrespect our marriage and care more about his sentiments than mine. That you appear to want him more involved in our daughter's life than her father. Now you're being foolish. I explained that Liam is merely a friend who is being helpful. Carter gave me a long stare, as if he was seeing me for the first time. I need some fresh air, he replied, eventually snatching his jacket. I'll be back before discharge. At 11 a.m. I was packed and ready to leave, but Carter had not returned. I messaged him. Where are you now? We're ready to leave soon. No response. By lunchtime, I was becoming frustrated. When the nurse came in with the discharge papers, I had to tell her that my husband had not yet returned. At 12:30 I was genuinely concerned and dialed Carter's phone number, which went directly to voicemail. By 1 p.m., I was furious and summoned Liam to come pick us up. When we reached the flat, Carter's suitcase, along with some of his clothes and his laptop, had vanished, leaving me stunned. On the kitchen counter was an envelope, bearing my name. I handed the infant to Liam and ripped it open with trembling hands. Brianna. The letter began. I can't do it anymore. The past 2 days have made it plain that I am not a priority in your or our daughter's lives. I've attempted to talk to you about the inappropriate connection with Liam several times, but you refuse to see or accept how your actions have impacted me. Having my child turned over to another man before me was the final straw. I need some time to consider whether this marriage can succeed. For the time being, I will be staying with my brother. I will contact you about making plans to see the infant. Please do not contact me for several days. Carter. What the hell? I took a breath and dropped the letter on the counter. He departed. He did truly leave. What is wrong? Liam inquired, gently rocking my daughter. Carter left. He took his belongings and fled. I could feel tears spring up in my eyes. Not sad tears. Angry people who abandon their wives and newborn babies? What type of man would do that? Let me see. Liam spoke, reaching down to read the letter. Oh wow, that is intense. It is completely irresponsible. I fumed. I've just had a baby. His baby, and he's upset because I let you hold her first. Who cares who held her first? Liam shuffled uneasily. I can see why that would have been important to him. Not you both. I snapped. He's being ridiculous. The next morning, I posted on Facebook. Nothing reveals a man's genuine nature like his reaction when things don't go his way. Apparently, some fathers believe it is acceptable to abandon their one-day-old daughter because they did not get to experience her first solo motherhood. Here I come. 3 days after returning from the hospital, I received a text message from Carter. I'll come by tomorrow at 2 p.m. I want to see the baby. Please have Liam not attend. Carter arrived the next day, looking dreadful, as if he hadn't slept in days. His eyes were red-rimmed, and he had the start of a beard. Can I hold her? He inquired without greeting me first. When I handed him our daughter, his expression softened immediately. He sat on the side of the couch, as far away from me as possible, and simply stared at her. So, are you finished with your little tantrum? I asked. He looked up, his face stiffening again. This is not a tantrum, Brianna. After years of being disrespected, I'm finally standing up for myself. Years, I scoffed. Don't you think that's a little dramatic? No, it is not, he said quietly. It's been the same trend throughout our relationship. Liam calls. You go running. Liam needs something. It has priority over our plans. Liam's sentiments are always more important than mine. That is not fair, I protested. Liam has been helping me while you have been away. I've left because you made it hard for me to stay. Carter said, his voice tight with emotion. Do you have any clue how it feels to watch your wife hand over your newborn kid to another guy first? Just to have that moment taken from you? For the first time, I felt a tinge of doubt. However, it sounded horrible. However, I was still too angry and arrogant to accept it. You are overreacting. It wasn't such a huge deal. It belonged to me, Carter stated plainly. And the fact that you still can't see it is precisely why I had to leave before he did. He claimed he'd have his lawyer contact me to discuss official custody arrangements. Lawyer, the first said, surprised. Are you serious now? Yes, he said. I'm filing for divorce. 3 weeks after the birth, I received divorce papers filed by Carter citing irreconcilable differences, but the detailed claims included an inappropriate contact with a third party. I was infuriated. How could he suggest I cheated on him? I called my college buddy Zoe, a family lawyer, and begged her to represent me. I informed her that these claims are preposterous. I've never cheated on Carter. Zoe remained silent for a minute after looking over the documents. Emotional infidelity does not always imply physical betrayal. It involves emotionally favoring another person over your marriage. Based on what you've told me, his assertions may have some validity. What? You are meant to be on my side. I'm on your side, Zoe said gently. The courts do not encourage cases in which one spouse has a very close boundary-crossing relationship with their ex. As if things aren't complicated enough, Carter sought a paternity test as part of the proceedings. That is insulting. I snarled as he instructed me. You know she is yours. Do I? Carter inquired, gazing directly at me. Because, from where I stand, it appears that you and Liam have been much closer than you have revealed. I felt awful as I watched him go away. Not only was I angry at the accusation, but I was also afraid. Carter was away on business for a night approximately 10 months ago, and Liam and I went out for drinks to celebrate his homecoming. We'd both gotten fairly drunk, and my recall of the conclusion of the night was hazy. When I eventually mustered the confidence to ask Liam about it, his reaction simply made me more anxious. He repeated the paternity test. His face became unnaturally blank. Why would he desire this? Is there any reason at all why this test might not show? Is Carter the father? I asked slowly. He swallowed visibly. We kissed. That is all. You passed out immediately after we kissed. That is it, I pressed, not quite believing him. Yes, that's it, he said. But something in his eyes made me question whether he was giving the entire truth. The court-ordered paternity test was set for the baby at 6 weeks old. The day of the exam arrived. Cheek swabs for Carter and the baby. Those were the longest 5 days of my life, waiting for results. On the 5th day, Carter called. I received the findings. Can you meet me at the park near my brother's house? Carter waited on a bench, staring at the ground. I sat alongside him, the baby sleeping in her carrier. Please tell me, I said, unable to take the uncertainty any longer. He removed an envelope from his jacket and handed it to me. I opened it with shaking fingers and skimmed till I reached the end. Carter Mitchell, the supposed father, is ruled out as the biological father of the tested child. The entire world tilted sideways. No, I whispered. There must be an error. There is no misunderstanding, Carter stated, his voice lifeless. I had them run it twice. Carter, I don't understand how this happened. I never stopped to think. Save it, he murmured, standing up. The facts speak for themselves. Please, I begged, tears running down my cheeks. I honestly did not know. I was certain she was yours. When he gazed down at the sleeping baby, I noticed tears in his eyes. So was I, he said quietly. But she isn't mine. And you've been lying to me throughout our marriage. I didn't lie, I insisted. I gave it some serious thinking. Stop. He shut me off. Even if he didn't know for certain, you knew it was possible. I am done. Brianna, what will happen now? I called after him as he turned to leave. Now you phone Liam and tell him he is a father. The divorce will be finalized as soon as feasible. I called Liam from a park bench. The results were back. She is not Carter's. A long hush ensued. Then, are you certain? Yes. Which means she is yours, Liam. My voice cracked. You are her father. He finally said, I need some time to process this. May I call you back? But he did not call back. Not that day. Not the next. When I eventually called him 3 days later, his voice sounded distant. Formal. I need to consider what this implies for my life. This was not part of my strategy. It was not part of mine either. I snapped. But she exists. And she is your duty. I know, he swiftly said. I just need some room to think things through. Space? That was what they all wanted. Carter desired space from me. Liam desired freedom from his duties. And I was left alone with a baby whose mere presence had shattered my life into unrecognizable bits. Liam eventually agreed to a DNA test, which proved he was the father, but he was reticent to play an active role in our daughter's life. He offered cash assistance but rejected the idea of regular visits. I'm not ready to be a father, he stated during one of our increasingly heated discussions. Neither did I. I yelled, finally reaching my breaking point. You wanted to be so involved when he assumed she was Carter's. You were right there when she initially started playing house in my marriage. And now you realize she's yours. You're rushing away. Liam whispered. That was different. I was simply being supportive. Then. No, I replied, realizing the reality. You were marking your turf. You liked the thought of interfering in our life and jeopardizing my marriage. You simply didn't want the actual responsibilities. My divorce with Carter was finalized 2 months after the paternity test results were returned. The last time I saw him was at the lawyer's office, signing the final documents. I hope you find happiness, he added as we parted, and I knew he meant it. I apologize, I replied, the words hopelessly insufficient for the harm I had inflicted. My daughter is now 6 months old. When the baby is asleep at night, I like to go through old images of Carter and me when we were happier. I recall all the times when I could have taken different decisions. I could have always respected his sentiments toward Liam. All the limits I should have established but did not. I felt allowing my ex to hold the baby first was cute. A pleasant time between friends. Instead, it was the final straw that shattered my marriage, before we ever left the hospital. And now I have to deal with the implications of that decision every day. If there's one thing I've taken away from this, it's that partnerships have boundaries for a reason. Not out of envy or possessiveness, but because respect counts. Trust is important. Putting your relationship first is important. I just learned that lesson too late. Here's the next story. Harry Kincaid peered out the rain-slicked window of his small apartment, watching droplets racing down the glass while nursing his third whiskey of the night. The Chicago skyline blurred beyond the glass lights, transforming into watercolor streaks that suited his current mood. At 42, Harry never anticipated he'd be starting again, living in a one-bedroom apartment that fit totally inside his former home's master bath. The envelope on the coffee table looked back at him accusingly. The divorce papers have finally been finalized. 15 years of marriage ended in a whirl of legal language and heated arguments. Worst of all, the betrayal that had started it all. His chest still burned like acid. Veronica Kincaid. Returning to Veronica Blackwell, he had formed his life around her, his college sweetheart. They met at Northwestern, where he had been a scholarship student studying finance. And she'd been a legacy admission, exploring marketing from various perspectives. But somehow, they clicked. Harry had worked his way up from nothing. The son of a manufacturing worker and a waitress from the South Side who had fought for every chance. Veronica was from old Chicago money, but when they met after 15 years, it felt refreshingly unsophisticated. He thought they were creating something together. He'd immersed himself into his position as an investment banker, working 100-hour weeks to provide them with the lifestyle he believed they both desired. Their Lakeshore Drive condo, weekend property in Michigan, and European holidays are all paid primarily by his growing wealth. Veronica had previously worked as a marketing executive at Preston Media, but her career had stopped after a few years. Harry didn't mind being the primary breadwinner. He was raised to feel that was a man's responsibility, despite Veronica's occasional remarks about feeling kept. However, the labor had taken its toll. Harry had assured himself that the late nights, missed anniversaries, and postponed vacations were just temporary. That once he found a mate, they could finally begin the family that Veronica had been putting off. But by the time he reached that point 3 years ago, something fundamental had changed between them. The memory of that day from 8 months ago still made his stomach turn. He'd returned home early from a business trip, planning to surprise Veronica on their anniversary. Instead, he'd been taken aback by the sounds coming from their bedroom and the identity of the man he'd discovered in his bed, Dexter Calloway, his purported best friend since business school and closest colleague at Meridian Financial. The subsequent confrontation continues to haunt him in his nightmares. Veronica had not even appeared ashamed. "You never hear, Harry. What were you expecting?" Her harsh gaze had viewed him as a disappointing investment who makes time for me. He listens. "When was the last time you actually saw me?" Dexter had been slightly more regretful, but his eyes revealed a different narrative. There was a glint of triumph there, one Harry had seen previously when Dex closed huge transactions. Harry had always known that Dexter envied his success, his quick promotions, and apparently his wife. But he never expected his friend to cross this line. What followed was a flurry of wrath, pain, and more nasty court fights, which Veronica had hired Sawyer, Chicago's most ruthless divorce attorney. Harry had been caught off guard by the financial demands. Veronica requested half of everything, including his future bonus and stock options. She stated she had sacrificed her own job growth to help him. However, the true shock came when Harry learned the debt. Over the last 5 years, Veronica had acquired many credit cards in his name, racking up huge sums on luxury purchases and covert excursions, which he subsequently uncovered with Dexter. She had also obtained a second mortgage on their holiday house, without his knowledge, faking his signature on the paperwork. By the time the forensic accountants finished their investigation, Harry had incurred a whopping $180 OO debt and had his credit score ruined. Despite strong evidence of fraud, the legal battle that preceded exhausted his remaining savings. Veronica's legal team was able to stretch the proceedings out until Harry couldn't afford to continue. His own attorney, Phoebe Winters, had been competent but outmatched by Veronica's family, money, and relationships. In the end, Harry accepted a settlement that left him financially devastated but freed Veronica free. The professional consequences were equally devastating. Harry had left from Meridian Financial, unable to contemplate working beside Dexter, leaving the partnership he had built over 15 years. His reputation in Chicago's close-knit financial community worsened as stories circulated. many of which Dexter created, painting him as unstable and unpleasant. The ultimate humiliation came when he discovered Dexter had been promoted to his previous position. Harry finished the last of his whiskey and turned away from the window. The cramped apartment felt like a jail, with walls closing in every day. They termed it rock bottom, the place where you could only go up. His phone rang with a text from Phoebe, who had become a friend during the divorce procedures. The lead on something. Breakfast tomorrow at 8 a.m. Harry responded back with a thumbs-up emoji. In his darkest periods during the last few months, Phoebe's unshakable faith in him had provided a lifeline. Unlike most of his so-called friends, who had faded away throughout the divorce, she had remained at his side even when her professional commitments to him ceased. There is no romance between them. She was happily married with twin sons, but she had become the sister he never had. As he prepared for bed, Harry noticed his reflection in the bathroom mirror. The man staring at him was a shadow of his former self. His visage is gaunt, with black circles under his eyes. His temples are beginning to turn gray. 15 years of establishing a life. 8 months. Watching it crumble. Enough. He whispered to his reflection. Pity and whiskey weren't going to make this better. He needed a plan. Harry had no idea that his meeting with Phoebe the next day would start off a chain of events that would turn his anguish into purpose, his humiliation into calculating, and his failure into the most methodically planned revenge Chicago's corporate community had ever witnessed. Milo's Diner on North Clark Street has become Harry's go-to-breakfast spot since moving into his new apartment. Affordable, unsophisticated, and thankfully far from the posh restaurants frequented by his former colleagues. It provided anonymity, along with great coffee. Harry came to see Phoebe Winters already ensconced in a corner booth. Her auburn hair was pulled back into a practical ponytail, and a manila folder sat near her coffee cup. At 38, she was regarded as one of the most thorough attorneys in family law, yet her compassion occasionally put her at odds with the more predatory members of her profession. "You look marginally less terrible than last week," she said bluntly as he slid into the booth. "Your praises never fail to touch my heart," Harry replied, motioning to the waitress for coffee. "Keep the charm for what I am about to say." Phoebe pushed a folder towards him. "Remember how you said you wanted to move out of Chicago? Maybe start over somewhere?" Harry nodded and opened the packet, which included printouts about Nexus Technologies, a mid-sized technology company situated in Denver. "One of my clients serves on their board," Phoebe continued. "They're searching for a new CFO. The current one is retiring. The company is solid, but underperforming. They need someone with your financial knowledge to assist position them for purchase." Harry scanned over the materials, a spark of curiosity breaking through his typical shroud of misery. "Why are they looking at me? I've been out of the game for months, and my exit from Meridian wasn't easy since my client, Josephine Alvarez, knows the truth, not the nonsense Dexter has been propagating." Phoebe leaned forwards. "She also recognizes brilliance when she sees it. And she recalls the work you did to restructure Meridian's technology portfolio 3 years ago." For the first time in months, Harry felt a flash of his old confidence. That technology portfolio was his idea. One that Dexter initially opposed, but later took credit for when it was successful. "There's something else," Phoebe explained, her voice lowering slightly. "Something that might pique your attention, specifically who?" "Nexus is his biggest client." Harry lifted an inquisitive eyebrow. "Preston Media." Phoebe gave a faint, knowing smile. "Ex-wife's employer." Harry's hands remained still on the folder. Veronica had been working for Preston Media for the past decade. Her corporate headshot flashed into his mind. Perfect smile. Calculating eyes. She had worked her way up to the position of creative director 2 years ago, and she planned to celebrate by spending a small fortune refurbishing her office. He was mostly using his credit cards, and he realized the connection was not commonly known. Phoebe proceeded. "Preston employs Nexus for its back-end systems. Boring but necessary infrastructural stuff. The contract is up for renewal in 6 months." Harry's mind was already running, calculating angles and possibly relaxing. "Is Josephine expecting me to help them maintain the press account?" Phoebe shrugged. "She expects you to help Nexus become lucrative enough to attract takeover proposals. You decide how you will manage individual clients." But she paused. "Martin Chambers, Preston's CEO, is close friends with Bradley Price, the founder of Nexus." Harry processed this information. Memories surfaced of charity galas, where Veronica was seen speaking with Bradley Price, a silver-haired software pioneer, known for his generosity and political ties. He faintly remembered that Price had walked away from day-to-day operations at Nexus, but remained chairman of the board. "There's one more thing," Phoebe explained, grabbing another document from her briefcase. "Your friend Dexter has been making moves. He's reportedly hoping to persuade Meridian to get press coverage." He seemed to have been getting along well with their executive staff. Harry felt a chilly conviction settle into his chest. If Dexter succeeds, he will get himself even closer to Veronica professionally. The prospect of them advancing their careers together, possibly using techniques and relationships Harry had built, hardened something inside him. Calcify further. When would Josephine like to meet? He asked. His decision is already decided. She is scheduled to attend a convention in Chicago tomorrow. Phoebe examined him closely. Harry, the first I'm telling you this as a friend, not your lawyer. This might be a genuine, new beginning. Do not let bitterness cloud your judgment. Harry held her gaze steadily. I appreciate your concern, but I am fine. I just need to get back into the game. But while they finished breakfast and talked about the details of the meeting, Harry's mind was already mapping a path considerably more complicated than a simple career change. For 8 months, he had been reacting to betrayal, divorce, and financial destruction. For the first time, he saw a way forward, a chance to reclaim control. The appointment with Josephine Alvarez, the next day, went better than Harry had hoped. A no-nonsense woman in her 50s with experience in venture capital. She cut through the formalities, tackling the Meridian situation directly on. I know what Calloway has been saying about you, she stated plainly. I also know it's nonsense. The statistics for your division over your tenure speak for themselves. 3 hours and 2 pots of coffee later, Harry received a job offer. CFO of Nexus Technologies. With a relocation package to Denver, and a salary to help him start repairing his finances. The role included considerable equity options, which are common in companies, but it was a break from his banking expertise. We need fresh eyes, Josephine explained. Someone who can recognize opportunities. Others are missing Meridian's tech portfolio reorganization, which you did. That's exactly the type of thinking Nexus requires. As he exited the meeting, Harry took a detour to the public library and spent hours researching Nexus Technologies, Preston Media, and their linkages. What he discovered supported his first suspicions. Nexus was inexpensive yet in a sector ripe for consolidation. With the correct methods, it might become a desirable acquisition target or acquire. 2 weeks later, Harry Kincaid flew from Chicago to Denver, leaving behind the ruins of his previous existence. He looked down at the city where he'd had his greatest victories and most painful betrayals. He sensed a shift inside him, as agony crystallized into purpose. In his briefcase was a notebook full of Nexus's initial observations and strategies, respectable ideas that would impress his new bosses. But in a password-protected file on his laptop was another entirely different plan. A meticulous, step-by-step blueprint for how Harrison Kincaid would rise from the ashes, seizing control of not only his life, but the fate of those who had betrayed him and exact revenge. So complete that Chicago's business world would never forget. The plane banked west, and Harry turned to look at the Rocky Mountains in the horizon. As Harry entered through the glass doors for his first day at Nexus Technology, the Denver morning sun cast golden light on the company's headquarters. The modern structure, with its open floor plan and mountain vistas, could not have been more different from the typical banking setting he had left behind in Chicago. For a brief instant, doubt flickered. Was he too old school for the digital firm culture? But he squared his shoulders and walked towards the reception counter. Harrison Kincaid for Josephine Alvarez, he told the receptionist. What followed was a busy day of greetings, orientation briefings, and early views of the problems that awaited him. Nexus, he immediately confirmed, was a corporation with good foundations that had drifted and wasted opportunities. The previous CFO, who is now semi-retired, but will continue to serve as a consultant during the changeover, was a traditionalist who failed to capitalize on new market trends. Harry settled into his large new office, which had views of the Rockies. He felt the unusual clarity that had always come to him when confronted with hard financial puzzles. Under the surface, issues hide opportunities that others have missed. Harry spent the next 3 months fully absorbed in Nexus operations. By day, he sifted through financial reports, spoke with department heads, and began adopting meticulous efficiency measures. By night, in his new downtown apartment, he worked on his private project, charting connections, discovering pressure spots, and honing his ultimate goal. His dedication was not overlooked. Josephine became an ally and mentor. Bradley Price, the founder who continues to chair the board, was impressed by Harry's work ethic and innovative insights and began seeking his advice on strategic areas other than finance. You've got a knack for seeing around corners, Price informed him one evening after a particularly productive board meeting. That's unusual. Harriet smiled humbly, but felt a flood of pleasure. Price's trust was critical to his ambitions. The turning point occurred 4 months into his tenure, during the quarterly review of client accounts. The press, whose media contract is due for renewal in 2 months, was identified as at risk. Preston's new procurement staff was looking around, implying that they might relocate their business elsewhere. This might have a huge impact on our bottom line, the account manager explained uneasily. Preston generates 12% of our recurring income. Harry spoke out, his tone calm. I believe I can help with this one. Josephine lifted her eyebrow. Do you have any links to Preston? Harry responded cautiously. I know their business model very well, and I know what they're looking for in a technical partner. Let me make a point here. Harry didn't mention his hidden weapon. Calvin Reeves, Preston's chief of information technology. Operations. 3 weeks previously, Harry had met Calvin at a computer conference in Boulder. Over cocktails, he realized Calvin was dissatisfied with Preston's leadership, specifically their lack of grasp of the company's technological requirements. Harry had deliberately built the relationship, establishing himself as a sympathetic ear and, eventually, a valued advisor. Harry flew to Chicago 2 days following the meeting to meet Preston's procurement team for the first time. Walking into the Preston media headquarters was weird, knowing that Veronica worked somewhere in the building, possibly just a few stories away. However, he compartmentalized his emotions and focused on the task at hand. The conference was a master lesson in strategic negotiating. Harry proposed a solution that addressed Preston's issues, while also enhancing Nexus profit margins through more effective service delivery. He had done his homework, discovering problems in Preston's operations that even their own staff had not completely described. Calvin, who was present at the meeting, enthusiastically supported Harry's assessment, forming a strong alliance that the procurement team could not readily deny. By the time Harry returned to Denver, he had not only obtained the pressing contract renewal, but also increased its scope by 30%. The victory solidified his reputation at Nexus as a miracle worker. Bradley Price quipped during the celebration dinner that no matter what they pay you, it's not enough. Raise your drink in Harry's honor. As summer transitioned to fall in Denver, Harry's clout at Nexus expanded dramatically. His financial reorganization plan was yielding results, with the company's valuation rapidly increasing. He established a devoted workforce by recognizing and promoting talented people who had been neglected by prior managers. Among them was Zoe Shawn, a talented systems analyst who would become his right hand. She expressed gratitude to him after he promoted her to director of strategic analysis, saying that prior management would never have given someone like me a seat at the table. Harry said that talent is talent, regardless of age or background. It was a mindset that won him a strong following throughout the industry. In October, 7 months after joining Nexus, Harry made his most daring move yet. During a strategy retreat in Aspen, he proposed that Nexus make its own acquisitions rather than presenting itself for purchase. We've been thinking too little, he informed the leadership team while delivering a presentation outlining his vision. Given our improved financials and present market conditions, we are in a position to be predators, not prey. He suggested a strategy for acquiring smaller companies with comparable technologies, developing Nexus into a more comprehensive service provider, capable of competing with larger companies. The lecture was welcomed with startled silence, followed by a lively discussion. Bradley Price then grabbed Harry aside. He studied Harry attentively, saying, "This is a fundamental shift in direction. You understand this would require significant capital?" Harry nodded. "I've already had preliminary discussions with numerous investment groups that are interested. There are no obligations, just taking the temperature." What he failed to reveal was that one of those groups was led by Warren Blackwell, Veronica's father. Though they had never met in person, the older Blackwell, who was separated from his daughter following a falling out years ago, was unaware of the relationship. Harry had reached him through intermediaries, attempting to conceal his identity behind layers of professional ties. "I trust your judgment," Price stated. "Finally, present the complete plan to the board next month." As Harry drove back to Denver after the retreat, a rare snowstorm blanketed the mountains surrounding him. He allowed himself a moment of true delight that extended beyond his retribution intentions. He was good at this, producing value and identifying opportunities that others overlooked. For the first time since his divorce, he felt fully alive. His mind was preoccupied with problems worthy of his ability. That evening, when the first snow of the season fell outside his apartment's windows, Harry received a text message from Calvin Reeves in Chicago. "She's asking inquiries about you. Told her. Nothing has been agreed. We're moving on to phase 2. Harry glanced at the message, his chilly smile forming phase 2. Yes, the board would accept his acquisition strategy. He was certain of it. And the first business on his target list. A modest but important marketing analytics agency that acts as Preston Media's hidden weapon for their most profitable client campaigns. His phone buzzed again. this time with a message from an unknown number with the Chicago area code. "I haven't seen you in a long time." A stranger overheard her making waves in Denver. "Drinks. Next time you're in town. For old time's sake, yours, Veronica." She found out his new phone number somehow. Harry felt a brief burst of old pain, followed by cold calculation. So she was aware of his accomplishments at Nexus. Good. That meant whispers of his resurrection were spreading throughout Chicago, precisely as he had intended. He did not respond to the message. Just save the number. It could be useful later. Outside, snow continued to fall, enveloping the city in a fresh white blanket. Harry looked out at the altered countryside. It feels natural. Destruction frequently preceded rebirth. Forest fires eliminate deadwood, making place for fresh growth. The Colorado winter killed out the weak, ensuring the strong survived till spring. He was no longer the man who had fled Chicago, broken and humiliated. That version of Harrison Kincaid died in the rubble of his previous existence. The man who stood in this Denver apartment, watching the snow transform the world, was new. Someone forged through betrayal, tempered by pain. And now, coldly and precisely focused on carrying out a plan. Years in the making. Phase 2 would start tomorrow. Veronica and Dexter didn't see it coming until it was too late. The holiday season transformed Denver into a picture-perfect winter wonderland. But Harrison Kincaid hardly noticed. In December, he was working 16-hour days at Nexus Technologies, making his office feel more like home than his sparsely furnished apartment. The board enthusiastically approved his acquisition strategy in November, allocating a significant war chest to the right targets. Now Harry was deep into the execution phase, ruthlessly evaluating potential acquisitions. "You should at least put up a Christmas tree," Zoe teased, bringing him coffee one evening after the rest of the staff had left for a holiday party. At the age of 29, Zoe had proven herself invaluable, brilliant at data analysis and unafraid to question his thinking when necessary. "Christmas isn't really my thing anymore," Harry said, not looking up from the financial models on the screen. Zoe sat on the edge of his desk. "This acquisition obsession is becoming a little frightening, boss. The data sync deal is going well. You can take a breath." Harry's first target was Data Sync Analytics, a marketing analytics firm that provided critical services to Preston Media. The initial approach had gone better than expected, with Data Sync founders open to Nexus's offer. "We're not there yet," Harry explained, finally looking up at Zoe. "I want to close this deal before the new year." He didn't tell Zoe why the timing was so important. Harry had learned through his careful cultivation of relationships in Chicago that Dexter Calloway intended to propose a merger between Meridian Financial and Preston Media in January. The move would strengthen Dexter's position and likely result in a significant promotion, possibly even a path to becoming CEO of the merged entity within a few years. Harry couldn't let that happen. The Data Sync acquisition was only the opening move in a sophisticated chess game. Once under Nexus's cover, Harry intended to evaluate all client contracts, including Preston's, and gain access to Preston's proprietary campaign data via Data Sync. He would acquire leverage, which could jeopardize Dexter's merger efforts. "You should come to the party," Zoe suggested, interrupting his thoughts. "The team lacks its fearless captain." Harry grinned wryly. "After an hour, I'll return to the grindstone." The holiday party at Josephine's magnificent home in Cherry Creek served as a nice distraction. Harry found himself enjoying the company of his coworkers outside of the office. Even Bradley Price made an appearance, pulling Harry aside for a private conversation. "You've altered this company in less than a year." Price spoke, his hand warm on Harry's shoulder. "I thought it was impossible." Harry responded modestly, saying he was only getting started. Price looked at him thoughtfully. "When Josephine originally nominated you for the role, I was hesitant. Your background was impressive, but the situation in Chicago raised red flags." He lifted his hand to stop Harry's response. "I am pleased I listened to her. Whatever demons drove you out of Chicago will serve you and us well. If only you knew." Harry thought, keeping a controlled demeanor. "I'm curious." Price continued, dropping his voice. "This push for marketing technology purchases. Is there a personal angle here? I remember your ex-wife worked in marketing." Harry tightened imperceptibly. Price was sharper than he had given him credit for just following the statistics. "And he stated that marketing technology has the biggest growth potential in our business." Price nodded, appearing satisfied. But Harry took a mental point to be more cautious around him. The older man had not created his tech business by being easily duped. As January approached, the Data Sync agreement reached its final phases. Harry flew to Chicago for the closing negotiations, which served several roles while the legal teams completed the acquisition paperwork. Harry set up a private meeting with Warren Blackwell, Veronica's estranged father, and the investor he'd been seeking for Nexus expansion capital. On a bitterly chilly Chicago afternoon, the senior Blackwell, 72, greeted Harry at his Lake Forest estate with silver hair and the same stunning blue eyes as his daughter. Warren earned a reputation as a skilled but cutthroat investor. The fallout with Veronica. Harry knew what had happened when she married him. Instead of the scion of another affluent family, Warren had preferred. Warren said, "Your proposal intrigues me, Mr. Kincaid," as they sat in his wood-paneled study. "Nexus has grown remarkably under your leadership." "We're only getting started," Harry responded, echoing his sentiments to Bradley Price. The DataSync acquisition marks the first step toward building a comprehensive digital ecosystem that will transform the way marketing organizations operate. Warren reviewed the proposed documents. His expression in the media reveals nothing, and he is one of DataSync's major clients. I noticed that Harry, among others, acknowledged, "We foresee strong cross-sell potential." What Harry did not directly mention was that Preston Media would eventually become reliant on Nexus Technologies for its most profitable client relationship tips, which he intends to abuse. Warren said, "I understand Martin Chambers is considering a merger with Meridian Financial." Harry maintained a casual expression, despite his internal admiration for Warren's intelligence network. "I've heard rumors," he responded. "Do you have any thoughts on the proposed move?" Warren's mouth curled with dislike. "Chambers is an idiot. If he goes ahead with it, Meridian will strip Preston for parts and dump the remainder." Harry leant forward slightly. "That must have caused you great concern." "Why should it?" Warren asked calmly. "Preston means nothing to me." "But your daughter works there," Harry pointed out. Warren narrowed his gaze, waiting for a reaction. "You've done your homework, Mr. Kincaid." "Yes. Veronica is the creative director. We aren't close, as you seem to know, yet I wouldn't wish her unemployment." He paused, looking at Harry with new interest. "Do you know my daughter?" The stakes were high. Harry had factored calculated risk into his approach. He could lie, keep his cover, and go as planned. Or he could bet on Warren Blackwell's well-known dislike for weakness and dishonesty. "I was married to her for 15 years. Harry stated calmly, addressing the elder man's stare without flinching. Warren Blackwell's expression did not change. But something changed in his eyes. Surprise. This is followed by something like respect. "Well," he explained after a long pause. "That puts an intriguing perspective on events." During the next hour, a surprising partnership emerged. Warren, it turned out, had never forgiven Veronica for not following his advice in choosing a husband. The irony that he now approves of Harry after their marriage had ended was not missed on any of them. But, more importantly, Warren retained a strong disdain toward Dexter Calloway, the suitor he had initially preferred for his daughter. "He approached me first." Warren admitted that he invested in the Meridian-Preston merger. "I pitched it as a chance to reconnect the family through business. I was disgusted, as if I'd given him capital after he revealed his actual character." Harry prompted. Warren waved a dismissive hand. "The man is a parasite, who has always attached himself to brilliance and benefits from their success. Did you do it with a Meridian?" "I believe he's doing it with Chambers of Preston." He gave Harry a deep stare. "What exactly are your plans, Mr. Kincaid? Beyond business acquisitions, that is." Harry thought about his response carefully. Warren Blackwell could be a formidable friend or a devastating adversary. The danger was measured but significant. "I intend to establish Nexus as the main technology provider in the marketing business," he stated. Each word is precise in the procedure. "I expect that those who underestimated me will pay the price for their mistake." Warren smiled slowly as he continued. "That's an investment thesis I can get behind." He extended his hand. "Mr. Kincaid, you will receive your capital on one condition: when the lesson is provided." Warren spoke, his smile turning icy. "I'd like a front row seat." The DataSync acquisition was completed 2 days later and announced to the business sector with suitable pomp. The press announcement highlighted the synergies between Nexus and DataSync. The united company's expanded capabilities, as well as the potential for future expansion. What it didn't say was that Harrison Kincaid now had access to the digital backbone of Preston Media's most important client campaigns, or that Warren Blackwell's investment fund had surreptitiously acquired a 15% interest in Nexus, with possibilities for more. It also didn't add that Harry had finally reacted to Veronica's text, agreed to meet for drinks during his Chicago trip, which he had purposefully timed, and then stood up, leaving her waiting alone at the expensive bar where they'd had their first date 16 years before. It was probably petty, but it served a purpose. He told her he remembered everything, and that the power dynamic between them had transformed. As she waited, she sent 3 increasingly irate SMS. confirming that she had received the message. Back in Denver, Harry embarked on a new step of his plan, data sync under the Nexus umbrella. He began a thorough analysis of all client contracts, presumably to uncover optimization opportunities. Zoe Chun led the analysis team, unknowing that their efforts were directly influencing Harry's personal goal. Zoe noticed something weird about the Preston Media account one afternoon, in late January. Their ads for luminous brands frequently surpass industry standards by non-statistically significant margins. Harry, who had been waiting for this exact revelation, pretended astonishment. "Show me." Zoe guided him through the data anomaly patterns that revealed Preston Media was distorting campaign results to keep their major client. Nothing definitively criminal, but definitely ethically problematic. That was a good catch. Harry informed her. "Document everything, but keep it between ourselves for now. I want to know exactly what's going on before we raise any alarms." As January turned into February, Harry initiated the next phase of his strategy. Nexus unveiled a customer success program that included more direct connectivity between its systems and those of significant clients such as Press Media. Calvin Reeves is still Harry's inside man. Preston advocated for the initiative internally, ensuring that he signed on. The integration provided Nexus with unprecedented access to Preston's activities, including the problematic Luminous brand initiatives. Harry now had all he needed to derail Meridian Preston's merger talks, which, according to sources, were heading toward a spring announcement. But he waited patiently, like a spider in the heart of its web. The time needed to be ideal. In March, almost precisely 1 year after joining Nexus, Harry received the call he had been waiting for from Bradley Price. "Martin Chambers wants to meet," Price stated without prelude. "He is flying to Denver next week. It says it's urgent." Harry allowed himself a slight smile. Did he say what it was about? No, but he seemed nervous. "Whatever it is, handle it with care. Preston remains a significant client." "Of sure," Harry responded, his tone full of professional concern. "I will make myself entirely available." As he hung up, Harry opened his laptop and accessed a secure file called Endgame. Inside was a precise step-by-step plan for the next phase of his wrath. A sequence of planned measures that would knock both Veronica and Dexter to their knees professionally, while also propelling Nexus and Harry to new heights. The parts were all in place. Martin Chambers' panic call was simply the beginning of the endgame. Harry glanced at the calendar on his desk. March 15th. The Ides of March. How appropriate in Shakespeare's Julius Caesar. In Harrison Kincaid's meticulously crafted play, treason was met with bloodshed on the Day of Judgment. It would signal the start of a new type of execution, one no less complete because it lacked physical brutality. He closed the laptop and looked out at the Denver skyline, a cold contentment filling his chest. Stage 2 was completed. It was time for the closing act. Martin Chambers arrived at the Nexus headquarters on Tuesday morning. The Denver sunshine did nothing to lighten his gloomy look. In their previous contacts, the CEO of Press and Media, who was 58, always exuded confidence and authority. Today, he appeared to have not slept in days. Harry planned to meet him in the Nexus executive conference room, rather than his office. A subtle power maneuver that placed Chambers in new area was an additional deliberate touch. He held the Preston CEO waiting about 15 minutes, which was not long enough to be offensive, but enough to establish the new dynamic between them. Martin Harry welcomed him with professional courtesy. When he eventually entered the room, "What brought you to Denver? I hope there are no problems with our services." Chambers cut straight to the chase. "What do you think you're doing, Kincaid?" Harry lifted his eyebrow. "The picture of innocence. I'm afraid you'll need to be more precise. This is an integration program." Chambers snapped. "Your employees are crawling through our networks, acquiring data well beyond what the agreement allowed." Harry kept his expression neutral. "The integration is continuing according to the requirements that your team accepted. If you have any issues, I'd be pleased to evaluate the settings. Do not play games." Chambers leaned forwards. His voice dropped. "You understand exactly what I am talking about. Data from the Luminous Brands campaigns." And there it was, the confirmation Harry had been looking for. Chambers knew they had uncovered the altered marketing stats. Harry spoke, allowing understanding to dawn on his face. "You're referring to the statistical irregularities that our analytics team identified?" "Yes." Those prompted some queries. Chambers paled somewhat. "These are proprietary methodologies. Your people had no business. Our employees were performing exactly what they were hired to do." Harry interrupted, his voice tightening. "Identifying abnormalities in data patterns that may have an impact on our system's performance. The actual question, Martin, is why Preston Media's findings for Luminous Brands constantly show engagement rates 30% higher than confirmed third-party measurements." An uneasy quiet enveloped the room. Chambers appeared to be contemplating his choices. His eyes darted to the door, as if he was planning his escape. "It's not as you think," he said it finally. "No." Harry's voice was ominously soft. "Because, based on the statistics, I believe Preston has been consistently overstating campaign results in order to justify premium billing to your most lucrative client. I believe you have been doing it for at least 3 years, and if Luminous Brands discovers out, they will not only dismiss Preston, but may also pursue legal action for fraud." Chambers' visage had changed from pale to ashen. "You cannot prove anything." Harry grinned weakly. "I don't have to prove it, Martin. The data speaks for itself. However, we have no intention of disclosing this information to Luminous Brands." He hesitated carefully, but not at this time. Chambers' eyes widened as he realized something. "What do you want first?" Harry spoke, reclining back in his chair. "I'd like you to end all merger discussions with Meridian Financial." Chambers looked at him in disbelief. "How did you do that?" "No matter how I know," Harry cut him off. "What matters is that the merger terminates today." "Impossible." Chambers shakes his head. "We are weeks away from announcing that contracts are being drafted. Dexter Calloway will be disappointed." "I am sure Harry finished for him." "That is unfortunate, but not my concern." Chambers examined him with new caution. "This is personal to you, isn't it?" Calloway mentioned bad blood, but I had no clue you would go that far. Harry did not take the bait. "This is business, Martin. Speaking of which, I have a counter-proposal for you." Harry took a packet from his briefcase holding paperwork, explaining Nexus and Preston Media's strategic relationship, which would give Nexus enormous control over Preston's technical infrastructure, and, as a result, its business processes. "Instead of merging with Meridian, you collaborate with Nexus," Harry explained as Chambers read the materials with increasing skepticism. "We offer better technical skills that will actually improve your campaign's performance. You keep operational independence while integrating your technological stack completely with ours. This amounts to a hostile takeover." Chambers protested. Harry shrugged. "Martin seized an opportunity with significant upside for news media. The alternative is to have your major client walk away when they learn the truth about their marketing numbers. The board will never approve this. Maybe you should let them decide." Harry made a gentle suggestion, armed with all of the required information. Of course, the connotation was in the air between them. If Chambers refused, Harry would make sure the press and board were aware of the bogus reporting to Luminous Brands, a disclosure that would almost certainly cost Chambers his position and any chance of the Meridian merger. After a lengthy, tense moment, the Chambers appeared to deflate. Only now is the moment to properly present this. "Of course," Harry agreed, graciously. "You have 48 hours. Oh, and Martin, keep this talk between us. If Dexter Calloway learns of our conversation, I'll presume you've chosen the opposite road as Chambers leave." Harry, visibly terrified, allowed himself a brief moment of gratification before taking up the phone. Warren explained that when a call is connected, step 1 is completed. Chambers just left. He will end the Meridian negotiations. Warren Blackwell's dry chuckle passed through the line. "Well done. How do you take it?" "Approximately as expected. Angry. Then afraid, then resigned. And my daughter? Will she be impacted by this shift?" Harry paused. Despite everything, Warren occasionally displayed signs of paternal care. "Not immediately. Preston's standing with her clients will benefit from the alliance, but her relationship with Dexter may suffer as a result." "Good," Warren replied curtly. "She made her decision. Tom, she accepted the consequences." He paused. "Phase 2 begins right now." "Yes," Harry confirmed. "Only the introductions were discussed. Consider it finished. Meridian board members in my circle will receive your calls." The next 48 hours went just as Harry had expected. Morton Chambers. After conferring with Preston's legal counsel, there was no choice except to accept the Nexus partnership deal and end the Meridian merger discussions. The announcement sent shockwaves across the Chicago business world. Dexter Calloway, taken aback by the failure of his meticulously organized merger scheme, reacted accordingly with a furious phone call to Harry. Dexter hissed when Harry responded. "You manipulative bastard. I know you're behind this." "Hello to you, Dex," Harry responded quietly. "I guess you're phoning about Preston's announcement." "Don't act innocent. Chambers refused to disclose what happened, but your fingerprints are all over this." Harry let himself absorb the moment. Maybe Preston simply saw a better opportunity. Our technology stack is much more relevant to their requirements than Meridian's financial services. This is not over, Dexter. Pal. You think you can damage my transactions from your luxurious Denver office? I made you, Harrison. Don't forget that old Harry might have taken the bait. Anger may have clouded his judgment. But the man who currently sits as Nexus Technologies CFO had learnt patience. You know, Dex, he added in conversation, I should thank you. What if you hadn't slept with my wife and helped her ruin my finances? I might never have left Chicago, or found my true calling here at Nexus. Harry's voice remained cheerful, as if he were talking the weather. So, in some ways, you are doing me a favor. Dexter's brief quiet spoke volumes. What are your plans, Harry? Planning. I'm only doing my job, Harry explained honestly. Developing Nexus into an industry leader. It deserved to be. If I had occasionally interrupted your plans, well, that's just business, right? After hanging up the phone, Harry immediately called Warren Blackwell again. Dexter grabbed the bait. He'll be watching our collaboration with Preston, hoping to find a way to undermine it. And stepping straight into your trap, Warren observed with joy. I've scheduled introductions to Meridian's board. The first meeting is scheduled for next week in New York. The second phase of Harry's strategy was probably the most daring. Using his contacts and reputation, Warren approached key members of Meridian Financial's board of directors. The goal was not a direct attack against Dexter, but a far more deadly stealth campaign to position Nexus for a reverse acquisition of Meridian itself. It was daring, maybe even risky. But Harry had spent months preparing the groundwork. Under his leadership, the Nexus market value increased, and Warren Blackwell's investment fund supported them in a strategic collaboration with Preston Media, lending them even more legitimacy. The financial structure was viable. The following week, Harry was in New York, meeting privately with Meridian board members who were becoming increasingly concerned about the company's trajectory under Dexter's influence. Harry provided them with a vision of Meridian's future that addressed their concerns while guaranteeing big profits, all while dropping hints that damaged Dexter's position. It's interesting that Callaway pushed so hard for the Preston merger, Harry said during one of these meetings, especially given what our due diligence showed regarding their reporting issues with important clients. The board member, Lydia Morrison, raises an eyebrow. Reporting irregularities. Harry pretended to regret speaking too freely. I should not go into depth. Needless to say, our collaboration agreement with Preston includes extensive control of their client reporting procedures. We could not compromise on this subject. The connotation was plain. Dexter had either overlooked major issues during his merger due diligence, or worse, had known about them yet proceeded regardless. Either scenario reflected negatively on his judgment. Similar interactions with other board members, in the coming weeks, undermined Dexter's position. Meanwhile, Harry continued to increase Nexus value through strategic acquisitions and collaborations, each of which brought them closer to the financial position required for the final step. Harry dreaded and anticipated the meeting. Finally, in late April, Veronica Blackwell Kincaid arrived unannounced in his Denver office. Your assistant does not appear to believe you will want to see me, she added from the doorway. Even at 40, her raven hair and calculating blue eyes remained captivating. But I think we are overdue for a conversation, don't you? Harry gestured for her to enter his face, concealing the violent feelings she elicited. Veronica, this is unexpected. She locked the door behind her and took a seat without being asked. She crossed her legs beautifully and wore an expensive designer suit that Harry recognized. One of the numerous purchases that led to his financial collapse. You've performed quite the Phoenix act. She looked about his office with appreciation. CFO of the company that now effectively controls Preston. Very impressive. What do you want, Veronica? Harry asked immediately. She smiled, but the look did not reach her eyes. Clarity. Dexter believes you're planning some grand retribution scheme. I told him he was giving you too much credit. Her gaze hardened. But now you're systematically undoing the merger he spent a year establishing, converting my company into a subsidiary of yours, and reportedly courting my father, of all people. Harry kept his expression neutral. It's just business decisions. Your relationship to Preston is immaterial. Bullshit, she remarked bluntly. This is personal, and we both understand that. Does it matter? Harry countered. The outcome is the same either way. Veronica leant forward slightly. It matters to me. I'm not sure if I should be concerned about my position at Preston. So there it was. The actual motive behind her visit. Not conflict or reconciliation, but self-preservation. Typical, Veronica. Always looking for number one. Your position at Preston is secure, Harry assured her. Creative skill is valuable, regardless of personal background. She studied him with distrust. Just like that. There is no restitution for what transpired between us. Harry held her gaze steadily. What happened between us is now in the past. Instead, I proceeded to demolish Dexter. She pressed. I'm creating Nexus. Harry corrected her. If this presents issues for Dexter, that is terrible, but not my main worry. Veronica's laughter was harsh. You could never lie convincingly, Harry. Not for me. She stood and smoothed her skirt. Whatever you are planned. Remember that Dexter isn't as easy to control as you would assume. He has significant allies. So do I, Harry replied simply, with a glimmer of uncertainty. Maybe dread crossed her face before she mastered it. I see this in my father, for example. That was surprising. Life is full with them. She approached the door, then paused. For what it's worth, I didn't expect things to end the way they did between us. The debt had gotten out of hand. Harry felt a wave of rage, but he kept it quiet. $80,000 in credit cards in my name did not get out of hand. Veronica. Neither did the second mortgage, on which you falsified my signature. These were purposeful decisions. She was gracious enough to appear uncomfortable for a brief moment. I wasn't happy. You were never present. Dexter was. And now I'm here, Harry explained softly. And you are there. Funny how things work out. After she went, Harry sat motionless for some minutes, contemplating the meeting. Seeing her had been more difficult than he'd anticipated. He thought he had conquered wrath, betrayal, and a lingering regret for what could have been. However, the event had also revealed something important. Veronica was worried. Whatever confidence she exuded, she could sense the shifting tides and had come to assess the threat level. This meant that Dexter felt the pressure as well. Good. It was time to raise it. Harry took up the phone and called Josephine Alvarez's extension. I need to convene an emergency board meeting, he told her without hesitation. Ideally, tomorrow am. What happened? She inquired, worried. Nothing yet, Harry responded. But it's time to talk about the Meridian opportunity. The following morning, in the Nexus boardroom, Harry presented his most daring plan yet, a reverse takeover of Meridian Financial. Framed as a merger, but with Nexus management seizing control of the combined business. Their market position is shaky, he informed the startled board members. Their last 2 quarters have underperformed. Their Chicago-based leadership is preoccupied by internal politics. While Warren Blackwell's fund supports us and our current market momentum, we can present a convincing proposition to their shareholders. Bradley Price, who had been silent during Harry's presentation, suddenly spoke. This represents a significant divergence from our technology concentration. Harrison Meridian is a financial services company with a significant technology infrastructure that complements our own. Harry countered. And their client list opens doors we've been trying to get into for years. The conversation raged for hours, with Harry answering each objection and offering financial models demonstrating the possible benefit. By midday, he'd persuaded the majority of the board to at least consider the possibility. These are simply preliminary attempts, Price cautioned. No commitments until we have completed extensive due diligence. Harry easily agreed, knowing that even rumors of Nexus approaching Meridian would send shockwaves through Chicago's corporate community, creating just the type of pressure he desired Dexter to feel. Sure enough, when carefully crafted industry rumors regarding Nexus and Meridian surfaced the next week, Dexter's reaction was immediate and predictable. He launched a counter-offensive, publicly denying the prospect, while quietly attempting to strengthen his position with Meridian. But Harry had expected this due to Warren's connections on Meridian's board. He knew precisely which directors were displeased with Dexter's leadership. He deliberately nurtured these ties, delivering facts that damaged trust in Dexter's strategic vision. The confrontation was no longer taking place on a personal level, but rather on the financial pages of Chicago and New York newspapers, in boardrooms, and on investor calls. It was business as blood sport, with billions of dollars and hundreds of careers on the line, and at the center of the storm stood Harrison Kincaid. No longer the betrayed spouse seeking petty vengeance, but the mastermind behind a business coup that would either propel him to new heights of power or ruin everything he had created in Denver. As May went into June, the murmurs evolved into formal discussions. Nexus officially contacted Meridian's board with a merger proposal that would value Meridian at a minor premium to its existing stock price, while restructuring leadership, with Harry as CEO of the combined business. The board, growing dissatisfied with Meridian's performance under Dexter's leadership, agreed to formal negotiations. Meridian's stock increased by 8%, and Nexus by 12% when the announcement was made public, a clear market endorsement for the proposed pairing. Dexter, fighting for his professional life, convened an emergency press conference in Chicago to oppose the idea as antagonistic and harmful to Meridian's fundamental beliefs. The financial analysts noticed that his comments had no specific objections to the financial arrangements, which were objectively favorable to Meridian shareholders. Behind the scenes, Dexter worked feverishly to locate another buyer for Meridian, a white knight, in order to protect him from Harry's advances. However, the corporate community detected blood in the water, and few were willing to question Nexus's momentum or Warren Blackwell's financial backing. In Denver, Harry worked a rigorous schedule, spending his time between leading Nexus, overseeing day-to-day operations, and organizing the Meridian takeover strategy. Zoe Chan, now fully aware of the high-stakes game they were playing, proved crucial in handling operational issues that Harry couldn't personally oversee. You know, she mentioned one late night when they were reviewing acquisition models. When you first started pushing us toward these aggressive actions, I assumed you were simply ambitious. Now I'm starting to believe it's personal. Harry looked up from his computer and met her direct gaze. Does it matter? Zoe replied carefully. Ambition has limitations. Personal vendettas are not always effective. It was reminiscent of Veronica's charge, and it made Harry stop. Was he pushing too hard, or taking too many chances in his vendetta? Had the distinction between strategic business moves and personal vengeance blurred beyond recognition? Before he could respond, his phone rang. When Harry called Bradley Price's private line, Harrison Price replied without hesitation that Dexter Calloway was in Denver. He's requested a private meeting with you tomorrow morning. Dexter approached Harry on his territory, which surprised him. It was unexpected. Did he mention what about? No. However, he stated that it was a personal situation that could affect the upcoming business conversations. Harry's mind raced with ideas. A threat, a bribe, or a new attempt to destabilize the merger. I will meet with him, Harry determined. However, after the call, I would like you to have legal counsel standing by. He turned back to Zoe, who had heard enough to comprehend the scenario. She warned, be careful. He's desperate, and that makes him dangerous. Harry nodded, acknowledging the logic of her caution. I know Dexter. He always has a backup plan in case of an emergency. Whatever he brings tomorrow, it will not be a white flag. That night, at his apartment, Harry went over the entire history of his interactions with Dexter, looking for vulnerabilities he might have overlooked, as well as unexpected maneuvers. The stakes have never been higher, not only for his revenge intentions, but also for Nexus, which had fully committed to the Meridian acquisition. Harrison Kincaid needed to be prepared for whatever Dexter Calloway had in store for him tomorrow. The Denver morning was brilliant and bright, the kind of gorgeous blue sky day that had enticed so many transplants to Colorado. Harry arrived at Nexus headquarters about 6:30. Well ahead of the scheduled 8:00 meeting with Dexter. You wanted him to get his bearings before facing whatever was ahead. At precisely 8 o'clock, his assistant announced Dexter's arrival. Harry took a long breath, fixed his tie, and instructed Cinnamon. Dexter Calloway appeared both familiar and weird as he entered Harry's office, with the same tall body and confident demeanor but fresh lines of strain around his eyes and mouth. His fitted suit couldn't hide that he had lost weight, and the smile he offered Harry appeared strained. Harrison, he greeted, reaching out his hand. Thank you for visiting me. Harry shook the extended hand briefly before directing Dexter to a seat. I was astonished by your request. What brought you to Denver, Dexter? Dexter sat down and looked around Harry's office. The elegant art, the breathtaking mountain scenery, Nexus's modest presentations, and his recent accomplishments. He remarked, what an impressive operation you have built here. A far cry from the sad man who fled Chicago last year. Harry said nothing while he waited. After a moment, Dexter sighed. I will get to the point. This merger you're pursuing must end. That is why you flew to Denver to place demands. Harry lifted his eyebrow. The merger talks are underway with the full support of both boards. Your opposition has been acknowledged and discarded. It is not a demand, Dexter explained. This is a warning. There are aspects to this situation. Are you not aware of this? Harry leaned back slightly in his chair. Dexter reached into his briefcase and took out a manila envelope. In your desire to bring Meridian down, also bring me down. You've overlooked certain critical details about Meridian's interactions with Preston and some investment firms. You placed the folder on Harry's desk and opened it to uncover financial documents, transaction records, investment flows, and corporation registration information. What am I looking at? Harry inquired, even though he had previously noticed Warren Blackwell's name on numerous of the paperwork. Warren Blackwell isn't simply supporting your play versus Meridian, Dexter explained. He has been secretly acquiring Meridian debt through numerous shell businesses for the past 6 months. If the merger goes ahead as planned, he will effectively own about 30% of the combined business. More than any other single stakeholder, Harry kept his expression neutral. This was not altogether new to him. Warren had discussed strengthening his role in Meridian, but not to this level. And why should this bother me? He asked. Warren has been a supportive investor in Nexus. Dexter laughed without humor. Come on, Harry, you are smarter than that. Warren Blackwell is not backing you out of charity or confidence in your business abilities. He's using you to settle old scores with me, his daughter, and Meridian's board, who ignored his counsel years ago. Harry stayed mute, allowing Dexter to proceed once he gained control. Do you truly believe I will keep you as CEO? You are a means to an end. When the merger is completed, you will be sidelined. Just another executive who fulfilled his duties. It was an option that Harry considered. Warren Blackwell was not renowned for emotion in commercial affairs, but Harry had his own safeguards in place, including provisions incorporated into his contract as part of a merger terms alliance with other board members. Harry dismissed it as guesswork. That's hardly a sufficient basis to halt a merger that benefits both firms' stockholders. Dexter leaned forwards, his expression tight. There is more. Warren is not simply acquiring debt. He has been discreetly meeting with Preston Media's biggest clients, including Luminous Brands. He has positioned himself to manage both their marketing agency and their financial services supplier following the merger. This was news, and it may be concerning if Warren was making autonomous decisions with Preston's clients. It may disrupt the delicate balance of connections Harry has been establishing. Again, Harry stated unequivocally that business strategy was not a cause to halt the merger. Dexter maintained that it wasn't strategy, but manipulation. And it does not stop there. He removed another document from the folder. This is a transcript of a conversation Warren and Martin Chambers had 2 weeks ago. Take note of the highlighted area. Harry skimmed the document. His gaze focused on Warren's comments. Once the merger is complete and Harrison has served his function, we will restructure both businesses. Preston is still intact under your leadership, but Meridian and Nexus will be stripped of their important components and sold off. Callaway and my kid will become collateral damage. But it had been the idea all along. A shiver raced through Harry. The transcript appeared to be legitimate, but it may have been manufactured. He had anticipated Dexter to make a desperate move like this. What? Did you receive this? Harry inquired, his tone tightening. I have my sources, Dexter said blankly. The point is, you believe you are the chess master in this game, but you are actually a pawn. Warren is leveraging your desire for vengeance against me to further his own purpose. Harry examined Dexter closely. The man appeared genuinely concerned, but Harry had seen him behave convincingly previously. In boardrooms with clients, and most famously, as a professed best friend for years while sleeping with his wife. For the purpose of argument, let us assume that this transcript is authentic. Harry spoke slowly. Why come to me? Why not report this to the Meridian board or the financial press? Dexter paused. Because, despite everything, we were friends once. And I understand that this isn't truly about business for you. It is about what happened when Veronica's name was mentioned. Harry felt the old rage resurface. Don't we need to discuss it? Dexter insisted. What happened? It wasn't what you thought. Harry's laughter was frigid. I found you in bed with my wife. I think it's quite clear. The affair was real, Dexter said. I will not deny or justify it. It was wrong. And I'm sorry for the misery it's caused you. However, neither of us intended the ensuing financial disaster. No. Harry's voice sounded ominously quiet. The $180,000 debt, the fake documents, and the nasty divorce that left me financially devastated while you received a promotion. And my wife. Everything was just an unfortunate accident. Dexter appeared to be truly uncomfortable. The debt was real, but it wasn't meant to hurt you. Veronica struggles with purchasing, primarily due to addiction. It started little. A few credit cards and online purchases. By the time I saw how terrible things had gone, she was in deep. The forged mortgage was her idea. A desperate attempt to pay off debts before you found out. Harry looked at him in bewilderment. You expect me to believe you didn't realize you weren't complicit? Dexter said, I knew about some of it. Not to the fullest degree. When you found everything after discovering us together, things became out of control. Veronica panicked, hired Annette Sawyer, and took the scorched earth strategy. Harry's mind was racing, reevaluating events in light of this new information, which could be genuine. Veronica had always been impetuous with money, even early in their marriage, and there were occasions when she bought gorgeous clothes or artwork that she couldn't quite justify within their budget. Even if what you're saying is correct, Harry said finally, it doesn't change what happened. You have betrayed me, both of you. The financial catastrophe simply put insult to pain. Dexter said, I'm not asking for forgiveness. God knows I do not deserve it. I'm asking you to examine whether this path you're on, this collaboration with Warren Blackwell, and your all-consuming drive to destroy Meridian, is truly about justice, or simply about suffering. A deep stillness descended between them. Harry found himself in the unsettling situation of contemplating Dexter's statements. If the transcript is accurate, Warren appears to have his own agenda, which could ultimately affect both Nexus and Meridian. in a revelation on Veronica's financial problems. While not justifying the betrayal, cast it in a slightly different light. Why should I believe any of it? Harry inquired finally. Why should I trust you right now? After everything. Dexter dug into his pocket and drew out a little USB drive, which he placed on the desk next to the folder. This includes further bank records, demonstrating the progression of Veronica's spending correspondence between us. When I realized how awful things had gotten, I found more recent communications that corroborated the transcript. He stood and straightened his jacket. I'm staying at the Brown Palace tonight. Review the materials. If you want to talk more, you know where to find me. When Dexter turned to leave, Harry called after him. If Warren is playing both sides, as you claim, why hasn't he removed you from Meridian yet? He is undeniably powerful. Dexter hesitated at the door. Because I am beneficial to him while the merger is pending. I am the story's villain. The incompetent executive that justifies Nexus's takeover. He smiled bitterly. Once the transaction is completed, I will be the first casualty. I suppose you'll be the second. After Dexter had left, Harry sat immobile, staring at the folder and USB drive on his desk. His thoughts were in turmoil. Years of conviction about what had occurred and who was guilty were suddenly called into question. He took up the phone and called Zoe Chen's extension. I need you to clear my schedule for the day and find me whatever we know about Warren Blackwell's latest investments, especially any connections to Preston Media's clients. He contacted Phoebe Winters in Chicago, although they chatted less regularly now that Harry was settled in Denver. He continued to trust her totally. When she responded confidentially, he said, I need a favor. I need you to check some financial information concerning my ex-wife, and I need it yesterday for the remainder of the day. Harry holed up in his office, going over the papers Dexter had provided, and cross-referencing them with information from his own sources. The image that developed was terrible. Warren Blackwell, it appeared, had been making considerably more significant actions than he had reported to Harry. The transcript's validity could not be established, but financial records revealed tendencies compatible with the plan stated in them. Most troubling was evidence that Warren had recently launched a private equity vehicle dedicated to purchasing troubled businesses, exactly where Meridian and Nexus could find themselves if the deal fails. Late that evening, he received a call from Phoebe. She stated unequivocally, I can't give you details without violating privilege, but I can tell you that Veronica was in therapy for compulsive spending for several months last year. The chronology corresponds to what you wanted me to examine. Harry thanked her and hung up, his world tilted even further. If Veronica had been in treatment, Dexter's argument that her financial malfeasance was motivated by addiction rather than malice would have been more credible. It didn't explain the treachery, but it did complicate the story he'd constructed in his mind. As midnight neared, Harry found himself doing something unexpected. Phoning Dexter's hotel room. We need to talk, he remarked when Dexter responded. Not about the past, but about Warren Blackwell and what he has planned. The next morning, an odd alliance formed in Harry's office between him and Dexter Calloway. Once friends, then fierce foes, they were now carefully united against a common enemy. They were joined by Zoe Chun, whose data analysis abilities would be critical, and Bradley Price, whose interest in Nexus' future required his participation. If what we suspect is correct, Harry said to Price, Warren is not interested in a successful merger. He intends to create a situation in which both companies are vulnerable, and then rush in to buy the most valuable portions at fire sale rates. Price appears concerned. Examine the evidence they'd gathered. This is distressing, but not altogether unexpected. Warren has a history of such plays. The question is, what should we do about it? The merging process is well advanced. Shareholders expect it. We won't block the merger, Harry stated firmly. We shape it. Warren's method relies on debt to gain control and influence over key clients. We need to neutralize both during the next few hours. Instead of implementing the original merger structure, they devised a counter approach. They'd propose a fresh arrangement, a holding corporation that would own Meridian and Nexus, while keeping them operationally independent. The structure would include measures prohibiting asset stripping and requiring supermajority consent for any significant restructuring. It restricts everyone's possibilities, even ours, Dexter noted. However, it also prevents Warren's play. Harry nodded, and we handled the client's concern by speeding the integration of Preston Media systems with Nexus. If we make ourselves vital to their operations, before Warren can take on their clientele, we will create another barrier. The proposal was daring and laden with danger. It needed convincing both boards to agree a significant change to the merger terms, but not overtly accusing Warren Blackwell of deception. A charge that, without clear proof, may boomerang disastrously. The strategy session completed. Price and Zoe withdrew to begin the necessary preparations. leaving Harry and Dexter alone for the first time since their confrontation the day before. An uneasy quiet fell between them. "We're not buddies anymore," Harry eventually remarked, his voice hard. "Working together against Warren does not erase what occurred." Dexter nodded slowly. "I know, and I'm not asking for forgiveness. But for what it's worth, I apologize. Not just for the affair, but for all that happened afterward. For not preventing Veronica from going nuclear in her divorce." Harry researched the man who had previously been his closest friend in preparation for the rumors I propagated, recognizing both a familiar face and the stranger he had become. "Why did you do this?" He asked the question that had been bothering him for more than a year. Was it only about Veronica? Dexter looked away, as if gathering his thoughts. "It began like way. An attraction that is forbidden, and so more intense. But deep down, I was jealous. Harry, you had everything. Natural skill, firm respect, and a perfect existence. I convinced myself that you didn't appreciate it and were taking it for granted." He laughed cruelly. "Isn't this the classic justification for betrayal? But once it started, I was unable to stop. And then, as everything went apart, I convinced myself I was only picking up the pieces. That since your life was already damaged, I might as well take advantage of it." The honesty was unexpected, and in some ways more terrible than the betrayal. Harry had imagined Dexter to be a calculated villain. The reality of a weak guy motivated by jealousy and opportunity was maybe more devastating. "I need to know one more thing, Harry," Veronica stated. "Do you love her?" Dexter seems genuinely surprised by the question. Following a lengthy interval, he shook his head. "No, but I thought I did. Or so I told myself, to rationalize what we were doing. But, no, I believe we were exploiting each other." "What am I to get?" "You wanted her to escape what she had become." Harry nodded, taking in this final piece of knowledge. "She will be collateral damage in this counter-move against Warren. Her position at Preston is likely to become untenable once the truth about him is revealed." I am aware that Dexter acknowledged. "She is already on thin ice there. Her spending habits had an impact on her job performance. Martin Chambers has been searching for a reason to let her go. The discovery should have provided pleasure, with Veronica facing penalties for her misdeeds. Instead, Harry experienced a broad range of feelings. Yes, residual fury, but also an unexpected surge of care for the woman he had once adored above all else. "I'll make sure she lands on her feet," Dexter murmured, as if reading Harry's mind. "Whatever happens between us, I owe her so much." Harry didn't say anything, instead turning to look at the Denver skyline. His long-planned revenge was changing just in front of his eyes. Not a renunciation of justice, but a more complex reckoning that recognized the human frailties that underpin the betrayal. The next 2 weeks were a flurry of strategic meetings, legal consults, and careful coalition building among both firms' boards. Working in an uneasy alliance, Harry and Dexter negotiated the perilous waters of corporate politics, gradually gaining approval from key players for their revised merger arrangement. Warren Blackwell, sensing the shift but not fully grasping its significance, requested an urgent meeting with Harry. When they gathered in Harry's office, he declared without preamble, "You've altered the merger terms." "Why?" Harry had carefully planned for this showdown. "Market conditions have altered. The original structure introduced vulnerabilities that we could not accept." Warren's eyes narrowed. "Vulnerabilities? For whom, exactly?" Harry responded evenly to both companies. "The new holding company structure maintains value for all owners, while allowing for a more gradual integration. It also severely restricts asset reorganization." Warren noticed his tone sharpening with curious priority. Harry met his eyes calmly, not curious at all. "Both boards seek to ensure that the combined entity stays stable during the transition. Standard corporate governance." Warren regarded him with a calculated face. "Callaway paid you a visit last week. Suddenly, you're changing merger terms that were almost final." "I'm no fool, Harrison." "No one suggested you were," Harry said calmly. "The adjustments benefit all shareholders, including your fund. Unless, of course, your investment thesis is based on something other than a merged company's success." The implied charge lingered in the air between them. Warren's countenance did not change, but a dangerous light shone in his eyes. "You disappoint me," he replied finally. "I believed you knew what was at risk, both personally and professionally." "I understand completely," Harry reassured him. "Better than you may expect." Warren stood, smoothing his beautiful suit. "You've made a huge mistake. This is not over." After he left, Harry immediately contacted Dexter at Meridian. "Warnos, you did not admit anything, but he is clearly dissatisfied with the amended terms. Will he fight us?" Dexter asked. "Count on it," Harry said grimly. "Make sure the security measures we described are in place for the Meridian Systems and Warren Chambers of Preston." as Warren may approach him personally. The stage was prepared for the final showdown, which could be more rewarding than the retribution scenario Harry had envisioned. Warren Blackwell's predatory ploy was exposed and defeated, with Nexus and Meridian emerging stronger for the alliance, which was created in crisis. As June came to a close, the new combination gained preliminary approval from both boards, clearing the way for shareholder votes. In August, the financial press hailed the odd structure as creative, particularly the governance arrangements that ensured both businesses' operational integrity. What none of the experts realized was that beneath the surface, a war for control was brewing, one that would decide not just the destiny of the merger, but also the professional prospects of everyone involved. Harry, standing in the eye of the tempest he had helped build, found himself in an unexpected position, fighting not for vengeance, but for atonement. Not just for himself, but also for the businesses and individuals whose lives have been intertwined with his search for justice. The last act was about to begin, and the outcome would astonish everyone involved. The counterattack in Denver delivered blazing heat in the quiet before the storm. With shareholder voting on a new merger structure only weeks away, Harry kept a rigorous schedule, spending his time between operating Nexus, overseeing day-to-day operations, and rallying support for the transaction. Warren Blackwell had become disturbingly quiet since their confrontation, making no public objections to the revised merger terms. However, Harry was not fooled by the silence. Warren was a patient predator, and his counterattacks were carefully planned for maximum impact. Still no word from the Blackwell camp. Zoe inquired one evening, as they studied the most recent shareholder sentiment analysis. Harry shakes his head. Nothing overt. His fund representatives on both boards have been asking technical concerns regarding the governance provisions, but that standard due diligence has kept Zoe quiet, so he is planning something. Harry was tempted to agree. Warren had not made his money by accepting defeat, especially at the hands of his former son-in-law and a man he regarded as a traitor to his daughter. The first indication of Warren's strategy came 3 days later, when Harry received an urgent call from Martin Chambers of Press the Media. "We have a situation." Chambers spoke, his voice tight with worry. "Luminous Brands have threatened to pull their business. Their CEO claims they received an attractive proposal from a new marketing tech consortia that can better meet their objectives." Harry felt a cold despite the July heat. "Let me guess. Warren Blackwell's fund has funded the group." "How did you know?" Chambers appeared astonished. "Because it is the move I would make in his position," Harry said coldly. "He is attempting to undermine the value proposition of the merger by undermining our client connections." After reassuring Chambers and presenting a counter-strategies for maintaining Luminous Brands, Harry convened an emergency conference with his crisis team. Zoe Bradley Price, over a secure video link from Chicago. Dexter Calloway. "Warren is making his move," Harry explained. "He is targeting significant clients, beginning with Luminous Brands of Preston. We must expect he will pursue Meridian's major accounts next." Classic destabilization strategy. Dexter predicted that if enough significant clients became concerned about the merger, shareholders will lose faith in the expected revenue models and vote against the agreement. Price ended looking worried, or demanded adjustments that would remove the safeguards we've set in. "Exactly," Harry confirmed. "We need to move ahead of this, Zoe. I wish to finish the vulnerability assessment. Which clients are the most at risk? What unique value propositions can we highlight to keep them engaged?" As Zoe nodded and started taking notes, Harry turned to Dexter. "You must individually contact Meridian's top 20 clients. Assure them that the merger will enhance, rather than disrupt services. Provide fee guarantees if necessary." The team rushed into action, establishing a complete customer retention strategy that included reassurance, incentives, and faster delivery of previously announced advancements. Harry personally joined calls with many significant accounts, using his financial knowledge to illustrate how the merged firm would better meet their needs. However, Warren's onslaught was not restricted to client relationships. 3 days after the Luminous Brand problem, a troubling piece came in the Financial Times, quoting insiders close to the merger discussions, who questioned the financial estimates supporting the transaction. These figures presume cost synergies, which may be impractical given the company's various operational methods. The anonymous insider noted that, while the governance system is novel, it presents inefficiencies that might dramatically impair shareholder value. The essay, while cleverly veiled in supposition, had Warren's fingerprints all over it. The timing was deliberate. Late enough in the process to raise doubt, but early enough to spread the uncertainty before the shareholder vote. Harry's phone rang soon after the piece was posted. It was Phoebe Winters of Chicago. "Did you see it?" she inquired without prelude. "What about the Financial Times piece?" "Yes." Warren's opening salvo. It's more than that, Phoebe explained. I've heard allegations that several prominent Meridian shareholders received thorough research packages yesterday, purportedly independent appraisals that question the merger's worth. Harry cursed softly. Warren attacked on numerous fronts, aggressively targeting shareholders as well as clients. Can you give me copies of these packages? Working on it, Phoebe reassured him. But there is something else. Veronica contacted me this morning, which surprised Harry. Veronica. Why is she calling you? Phoebe explained simply that she is terrified. It appears that her father paid her a visit last night. He offered to assist her pay off all her debts. Set up a trust fund with one requirement. Let me guess, Harry remarked solemnly. She publicly opposed the merger. Worse, he wants her to publicly discuss your mental state during the divorce. Claims of unpredictable conduct, vengefulness, and financial irresponsibility. Anything that make you appear unstable and unreliable. The planned savagery stole Harry's breath away. Warren was willing to use his own daughter as a weapon, leveraging her financial weakness and convoluted relationship with Harry to torpedo the merger. What exactly did she say? Harry inquired, astonished to find himself troubled by Veronica's response. She refused. Phoebe responded with a touch of reluctant adoration in her voice. She said she'd done enough damage and would not participate in her father's plots. That was when she called me. Want to know if you were aware of Warren's plans? Harry pondered the unexpected development. Despite everything, Veronica had drawn a line. It did not erase the past, but it did reveal a depth to her character that he had overlooked in his quest for vengeance. Tell her, he hesitated, unsure what message to give to the lady who had once been the center of his existence and was now the architect of its demise. Tell her I appreciate the caution and that she should be cautious. Warren will not take her refusal well when the call ends. Harry sat for a long time, reassessing his knowledge of the issue. Warren was proving much more ruthless than expected. It revealed a desperation that was both alarming and potentially advantageous, as he was willing to sacrifice his own daughter in order to gain control. The next blow arrived that afternoon in the form of a letter from the SEC, telling Nexus that they had received a whistleblower complaint claiming accounting problems in the company's most recent quarterly reports. The letter was preliminary, only informing the Nexus of the investigation, rather than presenting specific accusations. However, the time left little doubt about its provenance. Bradley Price fumed when Harry gave him the letter, describing it as a classic stalling technique. Even if the probe yields no results, which it will, because there is nothing to unearth, it causes uncertainty, thus pushing shareholder votes past the vital window. Harry nodded grudgingly. The merger agreement contained a termination clause. If the transaction was not completed by October honest, Warren was attempting to run out the clock. We need a counterpunch, Harry concluded. That evening, Harry gathered a war council in his flat away from prospective corporate eavesdroppers Zoe Chan, Bradley Price, and Dexter Calloway, who had come in from Chicago. We were gathered around Harry's dining table with Phoebe Winters and, strangely, Calvin Reeves from Preston Media's IT department. Warren's strategy is clear, Harry began. Attack client relationships, erode shareholder confidence, cause regulatory delays, and possibly use Veronica to question my suitability to manage the merged business. Dexter noted that this was classic siege warfare. Cut off the supplies, isolate the target and wait for capitulation. Exactly, Harry agreed. So far, our response has been reactive, focusing on strengthening client relationships, reassuring shareholders, and complying with the SEC inquiry. But that isn't enough. We need to shift the dynamics of this war. Our pricing was asked. Warren possesses vast resources and decades of business ties. He is playing a game he has perfected for over 40 years. By modifying the rules, Harry said with a hard determination in his voice. Warren. Strategy is determined by time and information imbalance. He operates in the shadows, utilizing proxies and cutouts to protect himself from the attacks. We need to bring him into the light. Over the next few hours, they devised a daring yet risky counterplan. Instead of fighting a defensive battle on several fronts, they would focus their efforts on a single decisive push, revealing Warren's true purpose and the techniques he used to promote it. Calvin Reeves, the IT specialist who had been Harry's inside man at Preston, would be vital to the scheme because of his position. He had access to digital communications that could reveal Warren was directly involved in the merger attacks. Phoebe warned that it was legally gray. Using internal communications in this manner may breach privacy laws. We will not use anything that would not be discoverable in litigation, Harry reassured her. We only need enough evidence to establish the pattern. The second component of the plan was Warren's business background. Zoe had been examining his previous transactions, noticing a pattern of seemingly encouraging investments that became predatory as organizations became weak. She said that 3 companies in particular display the template, and she showed her findings on Harry's laptop. In each case, Warren enthusiastically backed a merger or acquisition before exploiting governance flaws to force asset sales that benefited his fund at the expense of other shareholders. "We bundle this history with anything Calvin can provide on the current situation," Harry said, and submitted straight to the boards of both firms at the same time, not as an attack on Warren, but as a risk assessment requiring quick action. The third component of a strategy was the most ambitious and most challenging for Harry. It would require him to approach Veronica personally, not to reconcile, but to request her participation and reveal her father's methods. "Are you certain about that part?" Dexter asked. Veronica, who is clearly uneasy and involved, adds a personal dimension that may backfire. Warren had already made it personal when he approached her. Harry's stern response in her testimony about his offer would be strong evidence of his actual intentions. As the others left to carry out their roles in the plan, Dexter lingered behind. "For what it's worth," he said hesitantly, "I believe Veronica could truly help. She's changed since the divorce. The therapy for her spending concerns appears to have prompted her to examine other tendencies as well." Harry watched his erstwhile friend, still wary of their uneasy partnership. "Why are you telling me this?" Dexter shrugged. "Because, despite everything, I believe you care what happens to her. And because we're staking our professional futures on it, you should know it's not as impossible as it may appear." After Dexter had departed, Harry stood at his apartment windows, gazing out at the Denver night. The city lights gleamed against the darkness, reminding him of a rain-soaked Chicago evening over a year ago, when he peered out several windows, contemplating the wreckage of his life. He had gone so far since then, rebuilding his job, forming new relationships, and discovering strengths he had not realized he possessed. Yet here he was, about to delve into the past. He attempted to flee, pleading for rescue from the woman who had deceived him so totally. Take a deep breath. He picked up the phone and dialed Veronica's number. "Harry." When she answered, she spoke cautiously. "I did not expect to hear from you directly." He simply replied, "We need to talk about your father and what he's trying to do." The talk that ensued was unlike anything they'd had in years. Direct, honest, and free of the emotional manipulation that had defined their final months together. Veronica corroborated Phoebe's report on Warren's visit and revealed troubling facts about his larger objectives. "He does not only want to control the United Company," she explained. "He wants to dismantle it. He expressly stated that the Nexus Technology section will be sold to a Singapore firm, with which he has a partnership, and Meridian's client portfolios would be absorbed by his other financial interests and press." Harry asked. "Liquidated?" Veronica responded grimly. "He considers the damaged items, following the Luminous brand's reporting problems. Only customer ties are valuable to him." The callousness was astounding. Warren would destroy 3 firms and thousands of jobs to increase his already large fortune. Harry finally said, "I need your help. Your testimony regarding his approach to you could be critical in exposing his true intent to the boards." A long hush ensued. "You're asking a lot," Veronica admitted ultimately. "He is still my father. Despite what I know," Harry acknowledged, "and I wouldn't inquire if there was another option. However, 15,000 employment across these companies are at jeopardy. Whatever transpired between us, I do not believe you want that kind of collateral damage on your conscience." Another pause. "This time, the duration is longer. I'll help," she finally said. "Not for you. Not even for myself, but because it is the correct thing to do. For once in my life, I want to clean up a mess rather than make one." The next morning, Harry's counteroffensive began in earnest, while Zoe and her team gathered information on Warren's business past. Calvin Reeves utilized his access to the media to obtain evidence of Warren's direct involvement in the merger assaults. By mid-afternoon, they had gathered a persuasive set of emails showing Warren's personnel collaborating with anxious shareholders who had gotten the bad analysis packages, financial transfers linking his fund to the marketing consortium, negotiating with Luminous brands, as well as a damaging correspondence from Warren to a board member discussing the SEC case, were used as a strategic delay strategy. Harry discussed the documents with Phoebe, who had traveled in from Chicago to give legal oversight. "Will it be enough?" he inquired. "To prove criminal wrongdoing? Probably not to convince the boards that Warren poses an existential threat to the merger and their respective companies." "Absolutely." With the dossier completed, Harry organized emergency board meetings for Nexus and Meridian the next morning to prevent Warren from mobilizing his allies ahead of time. That evening, as final preparations were underway, the agenda merely said Merger Risk Assessment Update. Harry had an unexpected visitor at his residence. Veronica. I could have sent a written statement, she remarked, as he allowed her to express her discomfort. But some things must be said in person. She appeared both familiar and weird standing in his living room. He remembered the same stunning characteristics better than his own, but they had been transformed by the events of the previous year. She was leaner, less polished than he remembered, but also more present and honest. I've written a statement on my father's approach, she explained, handing him a document. It is extensive, and I am available to answer questions from the boards if necessary. Thank you, Harry responded, sincerely grateful. This will be really helpful. An uneasy quiet fell between them. The weight of their common history dominated the place. I owe you an apology, Veronica stated abruptly. Not just for the incident, but also for what happened afterwards. Credit cards, mortgages, and a violent divorce. I was out of control. Harry scrutinized her, expecting to find trickery, but instead discovered real guilt. Why? He asked simply. It was a question that had troubled him for more than a year. Veronica turned away, gathering her thoughts. The obvious answer is the spinning addiction. It is real. I've been in treatment, and it's helped me understand how my brain processes money and purchases. But that's only the mechanism, not the why. She stepped to the window and looked out over the same Denver vista Harry had considered the night before. The fact is, I was drowning in expectations and appearances in a life we'd created that never seemed quite mine. You were so focused on giving everything and becoming the success story that I became a supporting character in my own life. Harry felt a spark of defensiveness, but remained mute, allowing her to continue. Dexter, notice me when you stop seeing me, she murmured quietly. The affair was not about love, nor was it solely about sex. It was about being viewed as the center of someone's attention once again. Spending serves the same purpose. Each purchase provided a brief sense of power over one's choices. She turned around to face him. None of this is an excuse for what I did. The treachery and financial destruction. Those were my decisions and failures. I persuaded myself you deserved it, because you had neglected me. But that was rationalization for behavior that I couldn't live with. Harry pondered her words, which revealed a truth he had not been prepared to hear until now. Their marriage had been damaged for a long time, before he discovered her with Dexter, and it had been strained by his absence. He prioritizes his career over his relationships. He assumed that providing was synonymous with partnering. I appreciate your apology, he said finally. And while you are correct about my role in the breakup of our marriage, what about the decisions you made afterward? He shakes his head. They nearly wrecked me. I know, she said gently. Yet here you are, resurrecting something magnificent from the ashes. Maybe that's the silver lining in this whole catastrophe. We're finally becoming the people we were meant to be all along. As she prepared to go, Veronica halted at the door. I hope you win tomorrow. Not only does my father deserve to be stopped, but you've earned a second opportunity. After she went, Harry was in a reflective mood. He had been driven by his fury for a long time. A complex blend of emotions has partially displaced me. Lingering pain, yes, but also a strange feeling of closure. And behind it all, the first tentative shot of what could ultimately become forgiveness. The morning provided clarity and purpose. Harry arrived at Nexus headquarters early, reading the presentation for the final time before the board meeting. Zoe Bradley Price and Phoebe Winters joined him for a final strategy session. Warren will be present via video connection fee. Inform them that he's in New York today. This could work to our benefit. Phoebe warned him that it would be more difficult for him to manage the room remotely, as this would provide him plausible deniability. We must be prepared for him to argue that he is being misrepresented, or that his representatives acted without his knowledge. The next board meeting began at 9 o'clock, with Meridian set for 11 to allow Harry and his team to present to both. As the Nexus directors met in the boardroom, Harry noticed Warren's associates strategically positioned to intercede or object as needed. Good morning, Harry said as everyone had taken their seats. Today's update addresses substantial risks to the proposed merger that have recently come to light. These are not traditional operational or financial risks, but rather governance and integrity concerns that threaten the transaction's underlying value offer with clinical accuracy. Harry presented the facts they had gathered regarding Warren's history of similar maneuvers with other corporations. The concerted attacks on client relationships, the faked shareholder worries, and, eventually, the SEC complaint, which looked to be timed purposely to postpone the merger beyond its termination date. The room became more tense as the presentation went. Warren's representatives shuffled uncomfortably, while other board members seemed disturbed at the forming pattern. When Harry reached the portion about Warren's approach to Veronica, he delivered a recorded statement. She had practiced keeping her voice steady as she detailed her father's attempt to attract her into his scam. Warren, who was watching via video link, maintained a stone-faced expression throughout. Neither confirmed nor denied the claims. But when Harry opened the floor to questions, he finally spoke. Mr. Kincaid stated calmly, "This is a remarkable work of fiction. A personal vendetta dressed up as a business concern. You selectively presented data to create a false narrative regarding lawful commercial activity." Harry had anticipated the reaction. "Are you denying, Mr. Blackwell, that your representatives approached Luminous Brands with an offer to transfer their business from Preston Media to a consortium led by your fund? Business competition is not a conspiracy." Warren responded smoothly. "Every day, potential clients receive alternative proposals." "And the SEC complaint?" Harry pressed. "The timing is just coincidence. I have no knowledge of any whistleblower complaints." Warren argued that if one exists, the board should take it seriously rather than dismissing it as part of some complex scheme. Harry nodded at Zoe, who activated the final slide. An email from Warren to one of his fund managers 3 weeks ago, openly addressed utilizing regulatory delays to extend the merger's termination date. Warren's demeanor remained unchanged, but the muscle in his jaw twitched. "Where did you get that document?" he demanded. "It looks to have been manufactured, or taken out of context." "It was offered by a source within the regulatory process," Harry explained. Phoebe proposed careful wording to avoid disclosing Calvin Reeves as the actual source, which has been authenticated by independent specialists. For the following hour, the board engaged in heated debate with Warren's supporters, attempting to downplay the relevance of the evidence. Other directors became increasingly concerned about the pattern it exposed. Harry and his team responded to queries, providing further details that support their basic argument that Warren Blackwell intended not to support the merger but to manipulate it for his own advantage at the expense of other shareholders. By the end of the meeting, the tone in the room had changed dramatically. The board resolved to form a special committee to evaluate Warren's role in the merger process, and to put in place additional governance safeguards against the practices described in the presentation. The Meridian board meeting that followed yielded similar outcomes, with Dexter Calloway expertly handling the presentation in Harry's absence. During the early stages, Harry arrived to answer inquiries. He found the Meridian directors to be more concerned than their Nexus counterparts, particularly with Warren's apparent intention to demolish substantial pieces of both firms. The counter-offensive had achieved its major goal after taking control in the early afternoon. Both boards agreed to proceed with the transaction as planned, with enhanced safeguards against the specific threats Warren posed. More significantly, they prohibited Warren's fund from expanding its stake in either business until the special committee evaluations were completed. Warren's instant answer was subtle but foreboding. "This isn't over," he warned Harry in a quick phone conversation following the Meridian meeting. "You want the battle, not the war." "There's no reason for war," Harry said. "The transaction, as structured, benefits all shareholders, including your fund. The only way you can lose is if your purpose was always to break up these companies." Warren's laugh was always described as innocent. "Harrison's business is not about constructing. It is all about maximizing value. Sometimes that necessitates creative destruction." "Not this time," Harry stated firmly. "Not these companies." In the weeks that followed, Flair's continuous clashes as Warren tested the new merger defenses. He started a public relations campaign questioning the governance structure, attempted to organize other institutional investors to oppose the transaction, and even filed a lawsuit challenging the board's actions to limit his fund's activities. However, with his true objective out, and both firms now fully allied against him, these initiatives received little traction. By early August, with shareholder votes approaching, Warren was left with the dilemma of continuing a losing battle or gaining whatever benefit he could from the circumstances. On a hot August afternoon, Warren's agents issued Harry an unexpected meeting request. The planned setting was neutral ground, a private dining room at a downtown Denver restaurant, with a simple purpose: merger discussion. After conferring with Bradley Price and Dexter Calloway, Harry decided to meet. Warren Blackwell arrived alone, nicely dressed, despite the July heat. His silver hair was carefully styled, and his expression revealed nothing. "Thank you for meeting me," he said as they sat across from one another at the small table. "I was fascinated by the request." Harry responded neutrally. Warren looked at him for a second. "I'll give you credit for playing well. Better than I had anticipated. The personal connection gave you an advantage that I overlooked." "It wasn't personal," Harry responded. "It was about defending the businesses and the merger." Warren smiled, understanding that everything is personal. Harrison believes that business, politics, and even art are essentially expressions of personal will and desire. "You intended to beat me because of Veronica. Because of what you saw as my role in your demise. And you wanted to split up 3 companies." Because Harry left the question hanging. Because there is where the highest value exists. Warren just remarked, the sum of the parts is greater than the whole. A basic principle of financial engineering comes at the expense of thousands of jobs and years of potential growth. Warren waved a dismissive hand. Creative destruction allows the market to reallocate resources more efficiently than sentiment. Warren could not have seen the basic gap between their worldviews more clearly. Businesses were simply collections of assets to be reorganized for the most short-term return to Harry. They were living beings whose promise lasted far beyond the next quarterly report. I imagine you didn't want this meeting to discuss business philosophy, Harry replied, refocusing the conversation on realities. No, Warren acknowledged. I'm here to suggest a compromise. My fund will help. The merger is structured to avoid further opposition in exchange for 2 concessions. Harry lifted an inquisitive eyebrow. Warren added, first, my representative will have a guaranteed seat on the holding company's executive committee. Not me personally. I am not interested in operational engagement, but rather in someone who will guarantee our investment is properly considered in strategic choices. And the second concession? Harry inquired, suspecting he knew what was coming. You resign as CEO of the amalgamated business, Warren stated plainly. Callaway as well. New leadership, unaffected by the current ugliness. Harry had anticipated this need. Warren was unable to achieve his original goal of dissolving the companies, but he could get a personal win by removing Harry from the leadership position he had worked so hard to earn. The board has already authorized the leadership structure. Harry referred to me as CEO and Dexter as president of the financial services division. Boards modified their minds once large shareholders expressed concerns. Warren responded that my fund, combined with affiliated investors, owns about 25% of the voting shares. Enough to cause considerable disruption if I chose to pursue that course. Harry thought over the proposal carefully. Warren was proposing a clean break from the conflict, and the executive committee position was an acceptable compromise that would give his fund influence without power. But the demand for his resignation cut to the heart of everything Harry had created since leaving Chicago. This role, guiding the United business into a new period of growth and innovation, marked the pinnacle of his professional rebirth. To surrender it right now, allowing his nemesis to prevail would be very difficult for Warren. I need time to think about this, Harry stated finally. Warren nodded, not surprised. You have 48 hours. Following that, I proceed with my alternate plan. A public effort against a merger that will, at the very least, prolong shareholder votes beyond the termination date. After Warren left, Harry immediately contacted Bradley Price and Dexter Callaway to arrange an emergency meeting in his apartment that evening. It's a power play, plain and simple, Dexter said after Harry explained Warren's idea. He can't win the battle, so he's attempting to secure a symbolic triumph. Price noted as symbolic but significant. He had always intended to remove you from leadership. Though initially as part of a bigger demolition strategy, Harry pays for the length of his living room while contemplating choices. The question is, how much disruption can he really cause? Is his threat to postpone the vote past the termination date credible? Potentially by Price, with 25% of votes opposed to the merger and the possibility of judicial challenges. He might create enough uncertainty to cause some institutional investors to take a wait-and-see approach, thus killing the deal. Dexter determined that the termination clause occurs because excessive delay raises execution risk. Harry's decision became clear as he stopped pacing. I am not stepping down. We have come too far. I've built too much to give up now. Price warned that there is a danger involved. Warren isn't lying. Harry said quietly and firmly, neither am I. But we need a counter approach that neutralizes his remaining leverage, while not giving him what he wants. For the next few hours, they discussed various options, each with fatal flaws, until Dexter discovered an obscure provision in Meridian's corporate bylaws. He noted that while it is rarely used, important shareholders have the ability to call an emergency shareholder meeting prior to planned votes, if they can demonstrate that there is a risk of material harm to the company. Harry's attention was quickly piqued. Can we utilize this to force an earlier vote on the merger? Dexter reflected thoughtfully. We must demonstrate that delay itself causes serious harm, possibly through client contract renewals that rely on certainty about the merged corporate structure. Price noted that large shareholders would be required to launch the process, like the Employee Pension Fund, which owns 8% of Meridian. Harry suggested the same employees whose jobs would be jeopardized by Warren's demolition plan. Dexter's face lit up with a slow smile. That could work. Employees chose the trustees of their pension funds. If they grasped Warren's threat, we should hasten rather than postpone, Harry reasoned. Force a vote before Warren can fully mobilize his opposition effort. While Dexter worked with the Meridian Employee Pension Fund to convene the emergency shareholder meeting, The counter-strategy evolved quickly. Harry and Price contacted Nexus institutional investors with substantial evidence of the benefits of the merger, as well as explicit threats to those benefits posed by Warren's opposition. They also went one step further, providing chosen pieces of a dossier on Warren's previous predatory methods to financial journalists who had been following the merger story, not as a direct assault, but as context for the current situation. The subsequent pieces did not overtly accuse Warren of misconduct, but they formed a troubling picture of his financial habits and raised suspicions about his genuine intentions in the current merger situation. Warren responded quickly and furiously. "You've made this personal," he hissed during a phone contact with Harry the morning after the first article ran. "Our agreement has been terminated. Now, I'll make certain that neither you nor Calloway have professions when this is over. There will never be a deal where I step away," Harry said quietly. "And as for making it personal, you did it by attempting to use your own daughter against me." Over the next 2 weeks, both sides' actions escalated. Warren initiated his promised public campaign against the merger, which included full-page newspaper ads questioning financial predictions and governance structure. Harry responded with a series of investor presentations that gave a clear, detailed description of the expected synergies and growth potential. The critical break occurred when the Meridian Employee Pension Fund successfully petitioned for an emergency shareholder meeting, which accelerated the merger vote by 3 weeks, far before Warren expected to confront a decision point. The vote is now slated for late August rather than mid-September. Warren found himself racing against a tight deadline, while institutional investors were increasingly doubtful of his intentions. The publications about his previous investment strategies had aroused red flags, and his strong opposition effort began to resemble a personal grudge rather than a philosophical concern. 3 days before the shareholder meetings, Harry had an unexpected guest in his office. "Veronica, you seem surprised to see me," she noticed as she sat across from his desk. "I am," Harry conceded. "I assumed you'd steer clear of this conflict." Veronica shakes her head. "That is not an option anymore. My father has progressed beyond commercial methods. He is now threatening to reveal facts about my personal troubles if I do not openly endorse his merger position." Harry experienced a wave of loathing. "He'd use your troubles with addiction against you in a heartbeat," Veronica said cruelly. "Warren Blackwell's family loyalty goes in just one direction." "What are you planning to do?" Harry asked. Veronica addressed his look straight, showing genuine concern despite their convoluted relationship. "I plan to speak at both shareholder meetings. Not for you, not for Dexter, but for truth. My father is willing to damage businesses and people to get his way. Shareholders deserve to know exactly who they are working with." Her determination astounded Harry. This Veronica was not the same as the lady who had helped him destroy his finances a year ago. More grounded and principled. "He will retaliate," Harry threatened. "You know how he works." "I know," she said. "But I'm beyond being a pawn in other people's games. My father's Dexter is even yours." She grinned gently at his surprised reaction. "Yes, yours too. I may have started out as a target in your revenge plan, but I've evolved into something more difficult, haven't I?" Harry could not refute it. Veronica had grown from the villain in his story into a complicated human being, capable of choosing her own decisions. Some admirable, some not, but all uniquely hers. "Whatever happens with the votes," she said, "I want you to know that I'm dealing with my own faults right now. The therapeutic and financial responsibility classes are helping me become someone I can respect. Someone who makes men's justifications, rather than their own." As she walked away, Harry reflected on how much had changed since that rainy Chicago night. When he stared at divorce papers and credit card records, "Betrayal and loss have consumed me." The revenge he had so methodically planned had morphed into something far more complex. A war not only for professional vindication, but also for a philosophy of business that built, rather than destroyed. Shareholder meetings were scheduled on consecutive days. Meridian's on Thursday and Nexus on Friday, with a Meridian meeting held in Chicago. Harry watched via a secure video link from Denver, where he was preparing for the next day's vote. Warren appeared to the Meridian meeting, accompanied by attorneys and financial advisors, exuding confidence, despite the hastened timetable. The meeting began with conventional protocols, including quorum confirmation, agenda review, and a formal presentation of the merger proposal. Then came the open discussion session, in which major stockholders could address the assembled voters. Warren spoke first, presenting a polished argument against the merger that highlighted governance difficulties and questioned financial estimates. Dexter responded with a point-by-point response. His presentation was reinforced by independent analyses that demonstrated the merger's predicted advantages. The institutional investors in the audience listened intently. Their looks revealed little, Compared to Warren's apparent disbelief, Veronica was introduced as the following speaker. She entered the stage with calm dignity, acknowledged the assembled shareholders, and provided a damning portrayal of her father's true objectives, including an attempt to use her in his anti-merger campaign. My father's resistance is unrelated to shareholder value, she determined. It's all about control and extraction. He views businesses not as enterprises to be built, but as assets to be stripped and sold. I urge you to accept this merger not for the advantage of any individual, but because it creates something stronger than its constituent parts, with the potential for long-term growth that benefits employees, communities, and, of course, shareholders. Warren's face had darkened gradually during her words. When she finished, he rose as if to react, but then appeared to reconsider and sat back down, quickly talking with his aides. The vote that followed was a landslide 82% in favor of the merger, much beyond the minimum threshold, and a strong rejection of Warren's opposition effort. The following day's vote resulted in an even stronger mandate, with 87% acceptance. Before the vote, Harry addressed the shareholders in a forward-looking tone, concentrating on the potential that the merged firm will pursue rather than the fight with Warren. Warren did not attend the Nexus meeting, sending a delegate as a covert admission of loss. By Friday evening, with both votes cast and the merger authorized, Harry was in his office with a drink of celebratory scotch, looking out at the Denver cityscape as the sunset painted the mountains in gold and purple. He realized he had achieved not just the professional win of achieving the merger, but also the more profound victory of establishing something lasting and valuable from the ashes of his past existence. As he pondered what lay ahead, his phone vibrated with a text from Dexter. Warren's fund has made an official statement recognizing the merger conclusion and committing constructive cooperation moving forward. Translation: He's surrendering. Congratulations, Harry. See you at the conclusion. Harry grinned slightly, relishing the moment. The revenge that had begun with the utter professional annihilation of Dexter and Veronica and evolved into something more subtle, but ultimately rewarding. He had constructed rather than destroyed, generated value rather than extracting it, and discovered strengths inside himself that he had not before understood. The next chapter of his life will soon begin, bringing with it both obstacles and opportunity. But for the time being, Harrison Kincaid stood at the window of his Denver office, a man molded by adversity, tempered by struggle, and finally triumphant not just over his adversaries, but also over the bitterness that had threatened to engulf him. The game had over, and he had won on his own terms. The official announcement of the successful merger vote shook Chicago's corporate community. The headlines in the financial press gave the whole tale. Kincaid was approved to oversee the new financial technology powerhouse, following the Nexus Meridian merger. Warren Blackwell's opposition effort falls short as shareholders support the merger for Harry. The weeks following the voting were spent on integration, planning, and regulatory approvals. The merger was slated to close on October honest, exactly 1 year after he joined Nexus. The symmetry was not lost on him. In 12 months, he experienced a full transformation in his life. From despair to triumph. The newly formed holding company, Next Meridian, would have headquarters in both Denver and Chicago. Harry would be CEO, with Bradley Price as chairman and Dexter as president of the Financial Services Division. Zoe Chun would lead the technology operations, and her position to chief technology officer reflected her critical role in the merger's success. Harry's first trip back to Chicago as Next Meridian's new CEO had an undeniable weight of personal history. When his business car rolled up to Meridian Financial's downtown headquarters, he sensed a bizarre doubling of awareness. Recollections of his previous departure superimposed over his triumphant return. The executive floor hadn't altered much in the 15 months since he cleaned out his office. The mahogany woodwork, soft lighting, and hushed sense of moneyed authority all remained the same. But the people looked at him differently now, with respect mixed with caution, even a note of fear and suspicion. Dexter greeted him at the elevator and extended his hand with professional courtesy. Their collaboration remained uncomfortable, based on common interest, rather than rekindled friendship. Dexter welcomed him back and led him to the executive conference room, where the integration team waited. The troops are scared but curious. Your reputation precedes you. Which reputation is that? Harry inquired with a sense of mockery. Dexter smiled slightly. The smart strategic thinker who outwitted Warren Blackwell, the ruthless operator who orchestrated the takeover of his old employer. Take your pick. The integration conference was productive but stressful, with Meridian executives visibly concerned about their futures. Under Harry's leadership, he addresses their concerns directly, emphasizing that the merger was about growth, not cost saving, and that talent would be respected regardless of the firm from which it originated. I'm not interested in settling past scores, he told them, his gaze unwavering. What counts is who can help the next. Meridian become the industry leader. It should be. Following the meeting, Harry made one more stop to press the media, where Martin Chambers had requested a private chat about their role in the new corporate structure. Preston's offices spanned 3 floors of a dazzling structure, a few blocks from Meridian. As Harry walked out of the elevator, he was painfully aware that Veronica worked somewhere on these floors. Although their paths were not supposed to cross today, Chambers greeted him with the anxious reverence of someone who knew he'd bet on the wrong horse. Harrison, thank you for making the time. I understand you're on a tight timetable. Always time for an important partner, Harry said diplomatically. Following Chambers to his corner office, which offers a panoramic view of Lake Michigan. Once seated, Chambers got right to the subject. I need to grasp Preston's position and the new organization. The collaboration agreement with Nexus is obvious. But with the Meridian merger, everything seems questionable. Harry had foreseen this worry. Preston Media remains a valuable strategic partner, with the same integration points that we established earlier this year. The only difference is that you will now have access to Meridian's financial products for your customers. An additional offering that should help you improve your market position. Chambers appeared relieved, but remained cautious in leadership. There are rumors concerning your position. Harry finished for him. Martin, I'm not interested in micromanaging Preston. As long as the customer reporting issues we found are resolved. I understand that they have. Your leadership is not in dispute. The stress was obviously drained from Chambers' shoulders. Thank you for the clarification. There's one more thing about Veronica Blackwell. Harry maintained a neutral demeanor, but the mention of her name elicited a complex emotional response. How about her? Her position has gotten complex. Chambers explained carefully. Her work has greatly improved after she returned from her leave of absence. However, her father's crusade against the merger, and particularly her public resistance to him, has resulted in problematic client relations. Some people are hesitant to work with her because of the family conflict. Harry evaluated this information. He had expected Veronica to face professional penalties for her stance against Warren, but he had no plans to intervene. In either case, what are you proposing? He asked. Chambers paused. I am not sure. Honestly, it seems cruel to let her leave, given her recent advancements in her position in promoting the merger. However, maintaining her in client-facing jobs may prove untenable. Harry took a decision that startled even himself. Move her to the innovation team, which is working on a Nexus integration. It allows her to use her creative skills without the hassles of client relationships, while also keeping her tied to the merger's success. Chambers seems astonished. Do you want her participating in the integration? I want the top talent. Where can I bring the most value? Harry responded evenly. Aside from her personal past, Veronica is familiar with both corporate cultures and has demonstrated creativity. The innovation team requires such perspective. After leaving Preston, Harry had his driver take him through his old neighborhood, the opulent high-rise on Lakeshore Drive, where he and Veronica shared the penthouse apartment. You did not beg to be stopped. I simply looked up at the structure as they passed, appreciating the life that had ended there without feeling its gravitational pull. His final encounter in Chicago was with Phoebe Winters, who had been a steadfast ally throughout the turbulent year. So she said as they settled onto a corner table at their customary breakfast place. Even though it was late afternoon, the triumphant hero returned. How does it feel? Harry considered the question. Seriously. Different from what I expected. Less triumphant. Perhaps more difficult. Phoebe nodded, realizing that it had ceased being about retribution sometime along the way. Yes. Harry acknowledged. At the very least, it is not all about vengeance. At some point, creating something new took precedence over destroying what was old. That is growth, Phoebe noted. I must admit that when you first proposed using Nexus as a vehicle to take down Dexter and Veronica, I was skeptical. Harry smiled ruefully. You were correct, too. It was partially lunacy, fueled by pain. And yet, here you are, CEO of a merged organization that includes your previous employer, with your ex-wife's company serving as a strategic partner, and your former best friend reporting to you. Phoebe, lift your coffee cup to toast. Revenge or not. Harry noted that the outcome is impressive, but there are some unexpected issues. I never intended to work with Dexter again, let alone involve Veronica in merger integration. Phoebe regarded him with the penetrating gaze that had made her such a successful lawyer. Do you regret it? The transition from destruction to creation. No. Harry spoke without hesitation. What I'm producing today is more meaningful than what I intended to demolish. And maybe it is the true victory. Not over them, but for what they did to me. Debt, betrayal, and professional sabotage. Ultimately, none of it defines me. That evening, Harry prepares to travel back to Denver. He received a text from Veronica Chambers, informing him about the innovation team assignment. I'm not sure if it was mercy or punishment, but in either case, I'll make the best of it. Good luck with the closing. Harry typed his response before he could overthink it. Neither mercy nor punishment. Just business. Right talent. Appropriate role. Make it count. On the flight back to Denver, Harry reflected on his journey to this point. The pain that had drove him from Chicago had been changed rather than eradicated. The betrayal remained relevant, but it no longer defined him. What? To discover him now, would it make more sense for him to construct instead of destroy? To lead rather than avenge? Or to shape the future, rather than linger on the past? Warren Blackwell had made one more attempt to derail the transaction by filing a lawsuit, contesting the emergency shareholder meetings as procedurally unlawful. However, both ballots were decisively in favor. The courts declined to impose an injunction, so Warren withdrew the complaint rather than face a humiliating legal failure in addition to a shareholder scolding. Veronica had paid the price for challenging her father. Warren had entirely cut her off financially and emotionally, telling family members not to communicate with her. The talk in Chicago's social circles had been vicious, portraying her as a failed wife and a disloyal daughter. Dexter, too, had to face the repercussions for switching sides. Several clients close to Warren had left Meridian, and several of Dexter's old allies within the firm had distanced themselves. It is uncertain where power will ultimately sit in a united organization. However, as the merger deadline approached, a new equilibrium began to emerge. Those who had wagered against Harry, writing him off after the divorce as a shattered man whose career was over, tried to realign themselves with the rising power. Every day, invitations arrived to speak at conferences, join famous boards, or attend exclusive social parties. Harry accepted. Some declined, while others responded with the same internal admonition. None of this justified him. His rage was not motivated by external recognition or authority over others. It stemmed from what he built, created, and the value he offered to the world. The merger's closing ceremony took place on a beautiful autumn day, with aspen trees and the Colorado foothills turning gold against an evergreen backdrop. The occasion took place at Nexus headquarters, with key executives and board members from both companies in attendance. Standing at the podium to address the assembled leaders after the final documents were signed, Harry felt a sense of true pride that was devoid of vengeance. He told them that today was not the conclusion, but rather the beginning. Meridian provides a new paradigm of financial technology integration that generates wealth through collaboration, rather than exploitation. The trip was not always easy, but the end result was well worth it. Champagne was poured, and compliments were given. Harry found himself in a quiet moment with Bradley Price, the man who took a risk on him when his professional reputation was at its lowest point. You outperformed all expectations, Price informed him. He spoke with genuine admiration. When Josephine originally mentioned you for the CFO position, I was hesitant. It seems dangerous for a banker from Chicago to leave his job after a bad divorce. It was, Harry admitted. For both of us. Price shook his head. The danger was mine. You have nothing more to lose. But you did not simply rebuild your own career. You transformed Nexus in the process. He lifted his glass to disprove common wisdom. Later that evening, while the festivities continued, Harry strolled outside onto the headquarters terrace, seeking privacy to digest the year's events. The Denver skyline sparkled against the darkening eastern sky, while the mountains to the west were silhouetted against the lingering orange glow of sunset. He was astonished when Dexter joined him, obviously looking for a break from the festivities. Dexter, leaning against the railing next to Harry, remarked, "What a year." "That's one way to phrase it." Harry agreed. A pleasant silence settled between them. Not precisely friendship, but a cautious regard that may blossom into something more beneficial in their current detente. "For what it's worth," Dexter said, "I believe you've built something significant here, something that goes beyond the balance sheet." Harry looked at him, astonished by the earnestness in his tone. "We shall see," he answered. "The hard work starts tomorrow." As Dexter nodded and went inside, Harry lingered on the terrace, thinking about the scenery and the travel. The revenge he had originally envisioned had evolved into something far more meaningful. A second chance. Not just for professional achievement, but for defining himself on his own terms. Harrison Kincaid, the broken man who had left Chicago with nothing but debts and betrayal, was no longer present. In his stead stood the CEO of Next Meridian, a man who had discovered that genuine power came not from destroying opponents, but from creating something they couldn't ignore or reduce. The reckoning was over, and it had ended not with devastation, but with the transformation of businesses, relationships, and, most importantly, himself. 6 months following the acquisition, shutting Next Meridian outperformed even the most optimistic financial predictions. The integration had gone successfully, with both firms complementing strengths resulting in fresh opportunities that neither could have pursued alone. As he settled into his post as CEO, Harry developed a leadership style that combined strategic vision and operational discipline. The headquarters split between Denver and Chicago represents the merger's approach, which preserves the qualities of both businesses while producing something larger than the sum of its parts. On a fresh spring morning, Harry arrived at the Chicago headquarters for the quarterly leadership summit. The transformation from tourist to leader was complete. The executive suite had been refurbished to reflect the United Company's brand, and the workers greeted him with the relaxed confidence of a team that had found its groove. Zoe Chun, who had relocated to Chicago to handle the technological integration, greeted him with a tablet that displayed the most recent performance indicators. "We're surpassing our integration targets by 12%, she said, as they went toward the conference room. Client retention stands at 97%, much exceeding the industry standard for post-merger periods. Harry nodded in approval. The press and media integration is on schedule. Zoe verified that the innovation team had advanced several of the technical integration points. They have been remarkably effective. The innovation team, which included Veronica Harry, received regular progress updates while maintaining professional distance. He neither avoids nor seeks direct contact with his ex-wife. The Leadership Summit brought together Next Meridian senior executives from all departments, including Dexter Calloway, whose leadership of the financial services business proved more effective than many anticipated. Whatever personal feelings remained between them, their professional relationship had settled into a productive routine. Before we begin, Harry spoke to the assembled leaders. I'd like to acknowledge anything crucial. 6 months ago, many industry observers projected that this combination would fail. They highlighted cultural barriers, historical competition, and personal challenges. At the end, he gave a knowing smile, acknowledged with discreet nods around the table. But what they didn't realize, he said, was that those distinctions, when properly harnessed, produce strengths rather than weaknesses. We have proven that theory with our performance, and I anticipate to continue to do so in the next quarters. The meeting ran smoothly, with each division presenting progress and highlighting obstacles. When the innovation team's chance came, its director, Lucas Wilford, proudly outlined the quicker integration schedule. The breakthrough came unexpectedly, Lucas continued, exhibiting a complex diagram of systems architecture for one of our team members, who found a parallel processing strategy that allows us to maintain independent client interfaces while integrating the back-end systems. Much quicker, Harry asked which team member. Though he expected the answer, Veronica Blackwell Lucas verified that she worked with our technical lead to translate client experience needs into system architecture goals. It has been incredibly effective. Harry nodded, accepting the contribution without more comment. However, following the conversation, he requested a tour of the innovation team's workspace to observe the integration strategy firsthand. The team occupied a wide open space with digital screens on the walls and workstations placed in collaborative clusters. Veronica was in the process of explaining a client journey map to many coders. When Harry and Lucas entered, she faltered briefly when she saw him, but quickly regained her professional poise. "Mr. Kincaid, we were just discussing customer authentication. Integration. Do you want an overview?" "Please," Harry answered, retaining the formal distancing that had marked their few meetings since the merger. For the next 20 minutes, Veronica conducted a detailed description of the integration strategy, exhibiting technical knowledge that shocked Harry. She had always been creative, but this degree of technical commitment was new, evidently gained via concentrated work in recent months. Harry commended impressive work after her presentation, concluded that the parallel process strategy addresses various difficulties that we expected to take months longer. "Thank you," Veronica responded simply. It was a collective effort. As the tour progressed to other sites, Lucas softly murmured something to Harry. "She has been a revelation. Honestly, works harder than anyone. She never discloses her relationship to either you or Warren. Just focus on delivering outcomes. What else happened before? She is currently an asset to this squad." Harry nodded. He processed this knowledge, as well as his own observations, about the Veronica he had seen today. He was focused, collaborative, and technically engaged, in stark contrast to the lady who had nearly ruined him via spending addiction and deception. Later that afternoon, while Harry was examining reports in the CEO's office, his secretary reported an unexpected visitor, Warren Blackwell. "Send him inside." Warren came with the same dominant presence he had always had, Harry determined after a moment of thought. Harry noticed tiny symptoms of tension, such as weight loss, new lines around his eyes, and a tightening of his mouth. Harrison Warren greeted him and took his seat without waiting for an invitation. I see that my old office has been redecorated. The view remained fantastic. However, Warren, what can I do for you? Harry asked immediately. I'm not interested in verbal sparring. Warren looked at him with calculating eyes. I've made a proposition. My fund is interested in selling its next Meridian holdings in a single transaction before putting them on the general market. I thought I would give you first refusal. Harry's demeanor remained neutral despite his surprise. Warren's decision to sell his entire interest signaled a significant strategic shift and a tacit admission of loss in their long-running fight. Why now? Harry asked. The company is doing nicely. Most analysts anticipate ongoing growth. Let us call it an adjustment of priorities. Warren responded smoothly. My fund is looking into chances in other industries. Harry did not believe it for a moment. Something else was driving this decision, which Warren was not acknowledging. And this has nothing to do with Veronica's position on the innovation team. Harry offered, watching for a reaction. Warren's face flickered with something, possibly fury or pain, before he subdued it. My daughter made her decisions, he said coldly. Her association with this company has no bearing on my investment selections. But Harry had noticed the fleeting vulnerability and recognized its significance. Despite his ruthlessness and commercial acumen, Warren had been deeply affected by Veronica's public attack on him. The alienation between them was taking its toll. But the older man refused to admit it. I'll have our staff review the offer, Harry remarked, returning to business. Current market value. There is no premium. Warren's mouth constricted. The block size alone deserves a 5% premium above the market 2%. Harry reacted with a non-disparagement agreement that covered all parties. Warren's eyes, as well as Veronica's, took on a calculating expression. Harry confirmed that there would be no further attempts to undermine her, either professionally or emotionally. Whatever concerns you have stay private. Warren considered this and nodded once it was appropriate. My lawyers will draft the agreements. After Warren left, Harry sat immobile for some minutes, taking in the implications of this development. Warren's departure would resolve the final major source of contention in the amalgamated company's ownership structure. It marked the end of the conflict, which had began nearly 2 years earlier when Harry discovered Veronica and Dexter's betrayal. That evening, Harry had dinner with Phoebe Winters, who had recently been named Next Meridian's chief counsel, a position that acknowledged her critical contributions to the merger's success. Warren is selling his entire position, Harry informed her while they ate at a quiet restaurant overlooking the Chicago River. We were buying it back at a little premium. Phoebe raised her eyebrows in amazement. That is unexpected. I assumed he'd hold a position only to keep his foot in the door and upset you. I believe the Veronica situation hurt him more than Hill admits. Harry responded by having his daughter not only refuse to aid him, but actively oppose him. That cut deeper than he had thought. And how about you? Phoebe inquired perceptively. How do you feel about Veronica right now? I see you put her to the innovation team. Rather than allowing Chambers to edge her out. Harry thought over the question carefully. I'm not sure, he admitted ultimately. The rage isn't gone, but it's subdued. Seeing her channel her creative energy into constructive work, rather than irresponsible spending. Standing up to Warren, despite the personal cost. It complicates the story rather than erasing what happened. Humans are complex, Phoebe noticed. Really? Is it all good or bad? Even those who harmed us the most. The next morning, Harry had an early breakfast meeting with Dexter at a tiny cafe near the workplace. One-on-one meetings had become commonplace. Professional necessity evolved into something approaching mutual respect, if not friendship. Warren was selling his stake. Harry informed him as they studied the financial services division's quarterly estimates. We are purchasing it back. The agreements should be finalized by the end of this week. Dexter looked up from the reports, clearly astonished. That is a significant strategic shift for him. Do you have any clue what prompted it, Veronica? Harry responded simply. At least partially. The public rejection by his daughter stung worse than his pride can admit. Dexter nodded slowly. She has paid a great price for standing up to him, both financially and socially. Chicago's all-money circles have mostly supported Warren, not because they believe he is correct, but because it is how their world operates. Loyalty, especially to family patriarchs. Harry was surprised to learn about Veronica's current social standing. He had been aware of the financial ramifications. Warren had certainly cut her off completely, but had given little regard to the broader social repercussions of her stance. Harry noted objectively that she appears to be concentrating on her task. She is, Dexter verified, but transitioning from a socialite with unlimited resources to innovation has proven tough. A team member earns a corporate wage. He hesitated before adding, we're no longer together. In case you were wondering, I have not been since before the merger vote. Harry had suspected this, but had not inquired. Professional complications. He inquired, maintaining a casual tone. Dexter admitted, but mostly recognized, that what brought us together was not the foundation for any long-term mutual dissatisfaction. Opportunity. Forbidden attraction. None of this preserves a relationship when circumstances change. Following the meeting, Harry found himself wandering through the innovation team's workstation again. Unannounced, the team was in the middle of a problem-solving session with Veronica, who was leading a conversation on a whiteboard, covered with diagrams and annotations. She observed him loitering on the outskirts and, after making her point, excused herself to approach him. She noted 2 visits in 2 days. Should the team be concerned? Not at all. Harry reassured her. The progress reports are outstanding. I'd like to see more of the authentication solution you provided yesterday. Veronica appeared suspicious, but brought him to a quieter location with a digital monitor so she could show the system in further detail. Harry looked at her with renewed interest as she talked him through the technical aspects. The Veronica before him now differed significantly from the woman he had married. Not only did she lose the horrible thinness of her addiction days, but she also got a healthier shine. However, in her concentration, she spoke passionately about solving genuine problems rather than producing flawless looks. Your father came to see me yesterday, Harry explained, when a technical explanation was completed. He is selling his position in Next Meridian. Veronica remained still, taking in the information. All of it. The full stake, Harry confirmed. We are purchasing it back. A complex range of emotions washed over her face. Sadness, resignation, and possibly a tinge of relief. I'm not surprised, she remarked. Finally working for a corporation where his daughter openly challenged him was probably too much for his pride. Harry stated that this is a wonderful step for the organization. This eliminates a possible cause of ongoing dispute. Veronica agreed, then paused before asking, how is he? Did he appear fine? The inquiry exposed a vulnerability that caught Harry off guard. Despite everything Warren had done, she remained concerned about his well-being. It served as a reminder of the complexities of familial bonds, including damaged ones. Harry said cautiously, he seemed like himself. Perhaps somewhat more strained than usual, but otherwise unchanged. Veronica nodded again, accepting the assessment. Thank you for informing me. And thank you for the innovation team assignment. It's been hard in the greatest possible way. As Harry returned to his office, he reflected on how much his understanding of Veronica had grown. The cartoon villain of his revenge fantasies has been replaced by a flawed but striving human being. Someone who has made horrible mistakes, but is sincerely seeking to rebuild something better from the rubble. The same could be said regarding his feelings toward Dexter, while their connection remained more convoluted. Given their friendship, the betrayal was more devastating, and the professional competitiveness brought dimensions of complexity that did not previously present. With Veronica, even there, Harry saw change in himself as much as in Dexter. The all-consuming want to destroy his former friend had been replaced with the ability to collaborate successfully, to utilize Dexter's true talents while preserving proper boundaries. The week culminated with a formal announcement of Warren's fund's stock buyback, which was presented to the market as a strategic reallocation of resources on both sides. The financial press took note of the event with interest, but without the frenzied conjecture that had dominated coverage of the merger dispute. Blackwell leaves the Next Meridian Post, as the business exceeds integration milestones. Read the Wall Street Journal headline. The accompanying study claimed that the action represented a normalization of ties, following the difficult merger process. Harry found himself in a reflective mood while reading the coverage in his Denver apartment over the weekend. Warren Blackwell's formal exit from Next Meridian's ownership structure marked the conclusion of the conflicts that had defined the previous 2 years of his life. The revenge he had sought had evolved into something far more meaningful, the founding of a company that embodied his values and vision, professional redemption that came not from destroying others, but from creating something valuable, and personal growth that enabled him to see even those who had betrayed him with greater complexity and, increasingly, compassion. A phone notification stopped his thoughts. Veronica sent an email with the subject line, Innovation Team Breakthrough. He opened it to find a detailed explanation of the team's innovative integration technique, which could be used across many business lines. The technical information was remarkable, but the final paragraph drew his attention. I understand that our personal history hampers professional communication, but I wanted to discuss this openly due to its strategic significance. The team worked really hard to develop this solution, and it exemplifies the type of cross-company innovation that the merger was intended to stimulate. Whatever else has happened between us, I am pleased to be a part of creating something worthwhile here. Harry found himself penning a response, without fully comprehending the consequences. The solution seems promising. Plan a formal presentation for the executive committee next week. And for whatever it's worth, I am delighted you are finding purpose in your career. Building is always more fulfilling than destroying, a lesson I've learned during the last 2 years as well. As he sent the message, Harry recognized it was just another step in the long, hard process of moving forward, not by forgetting the past or minimizing the harm done, but by acknowledging it while refusing to be defined by it. He had once envisioned glorious revenge for Veronica and Dexter, but it had been expertly wrecked. Socially isolated and financially wrecked, his life now looked empty in comparison to what he had accomplished. A flourishing business founded in part on their talents, and aimed toward aims that he valued. He followed ideals that he believed in. He discovered that he was truly happy, not with spiteful satisfaction, but with a deeper contentment that came from building rather than destroying, from progress rather than stagnation, from the future rather than the past. The story had started with betrayal and loss. His ex-wife, who had cheated on him with his best friend, left him in debt, and then found herself reporting to him as the new owner of her firm, had developed into something far more interesting and intricate than a simple revenge story. It had become a parable about how organizations join to generate greater value for people by confronting their weaknesses and discovering new strengths. Most crucially, of Harrison Kincaid himself, who had transformed from a shattered victim to the architect of his own redemption. Outside his window, the Denver mountains stood forever against the setting sun, their peaks capturing the last rays of golden light as the valleys dropped into shadow. Harry, like those mountains, had weathered storms and erosion, emerging stronger and more defined, rather than weakened. The resolution was completed. The future, with all of its difficulties and opportunities, beckoned, and Harrison Kincaid approached it not as a man defined by previous betrayals, but as the master of his own fate. Scarred but stronger, challenged but triumphant. Finally, you're irrevocably free. Thank you for listening to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Also, leave a comment below to share your thoughts on what